What is going on, Rotogrinders? Dean here. It's Dean 7904 if you want to get all technical. I mean, it is 10:10 on the East Coast, 7:10 on the West Coast, 9:10 Tennessee time. Of course, it's time for the flagship show here at Rotogrinders. It's called Grinderslive. We are going to be talking Week 15 NFL DFS for the next 3 hours. We're rounding up 2 hours and 50 minutes. We'll be relieved in the next hour or so. But batting first, leading off, we're going to be setting the table, setting the stage as far as the Week 15 slate. Very excited to have the creator and the curator of the Blitz and the Bat. Let's give the Bat some love too. It'll make an appearance soon enough, I'm sure. It's Derek Carty. What's up, Carty?
Not much. How's it going?
Yeah, man. It's I feel like I feel good. I feel locked in the slate. I feel, sometimes you feel great about a slate and it blows up in your face, and sometimes you feel not so great and it works out. I'm feeling good about this one. How about yourself? How are you feeling about Week 15?
I feel like I'm making the right decisions, but it winds up being pretty gross. Like, I think a lot of the high price stuff you really want to make a point to get this week in cash games, which leaves you with like a whole bunch of really cheap gross receivers. But I kind of think that's the move. So I think process wise, I'm feeling good, but it feels weird. I just feel like Derrick Henry is going to come out and get like 6 points, and I'm just going to lose my mind.
You're talking like a man who's got a lot of New Orleans Saints and potentially a Denzel Mims on your lineup. I don't know.
I think you pretty much nailed me.
I do have access to the Blitz. Hey, it's Grant Neefer. What's going on? Big Joe Exotic fan. What's going on, Neefer? How are things out there on the West Coast for you?
I am a big Joe Exotic fan. I didn't get to wear this hat on Halloween because, Kofifi. So now I'm wearing it.
That was your outfit? A hat?
I had the hat. I was getting ready to shave it into a mustache. I probably should have just put on the shirt too. I fudged real bad, guys.
You have a shirt that accompanies the hat? Yeah.
Do I just stand up, leave, and put on the shirt?
I don't know. I mean, Cardi can talk quarterbacks.
Be right back.
Do you know what he's doing here, Cardi? Are you aware? Do you have the Netflix? Are you aware of Joe Exotic and the Tiger King?
I mean, I'm aware of Tiger King. I didn't actually see it. I was busy this summer during pandemic when everyone's watching Tiger King. I was building a little thing called the Bat X, which you may have heard of, which actually tested. There's a Fangraph study a couple of days ago, tested extremely well. Best projection system of 2020, which was really exciting. So that was time well spent, but I know nothing about Tiger King.
I mean, you're probably better off, to be perfectly honest. I don't know. We're going to have the YouTube chat start talking about Tiger King for now. Hey, YouTube, what's up? Like, subscribe, turn on notifications.
I lost the shirt.
Wait. Oh, you lost. You've already determined you've lost the shirt. All right, that was quick. Welcome back, Grant. You didn't really miss much. I was saying hello to YouTube. Like, subscribe. Doesn't cost you anything. Just tap the subscribe button. Turn on notifications. Let you guys know when we go live. It's good stuff as far as, hey, NBA right around the corner. We'll be doing NBA shows for sure, obviously. Tons of stuff for premium and lots of shows here on the YouTube channel as well. Grant, give me your screenshot as far as this slate. One of the first things you said to us, you said a couple things. We'll kind of edit that. But one of the first things you said to us NFL DFS-wise was you're trying to figure out how to be different as far as this slate. Have you figured it out yet?
I mean, yes, I know how to be different. The problem is, do I want to? Like, every single running back on the slate, there's very, very clear leverage plays off of them. Do I want to do that, though? I don't know. Like Kamara, obviously playing the passing game more, assuming it's going to be more of a passing game. He kind of is a little bit reliant on receiving work and touchdowns, but like anything can happen. That one's the least likely one I'm going to leverage off of. But Akers very clearly go with Kupp and Woods. Henry very clearly go with A.J. Brown, Corey Davis. Like Fournette just faded because it's going up against one of the best run defense in the league right now. But there's leverage plays everywhere, but the chalk is just so darn good because of the volume or the price.
I would also throw the Rams in the conversation too. Akers is elevating, and
I said that.
Did you say the Rams? And I guess I wasn't listening.
I said Akers. Silly goose.
All right, you're up 1-0. My apologies. We'll dive in and break it down position by position, obviously, and we're going to go for the next 45 minutes or so. Then we'll hand it off to, let's see, we got Tambo coming up after us. He's going to be with Eric Beinfor. And then I believe closing us out. Actually, Christy's not going to be there today because she's got a live final to take care of. So good luck to her as well as I think Squirrel Patrol and Hanson as well. All three of them have live finals. I saw Dan tweeting that out today. Roth will be on and Tuttle will be on to close us out. Take you guys answer as many questions in chat as possible. We'll do our best to answer questions too as we kind of go along here. Cardi, quarterback wise, I don't think there's a quarterback I feel like I absolutely have to have from a cash game perspective. There's 4 or 5 that are in the conversation that kind of sort of see how it fits with the rest of my lineup construction. Do you sort of agree with that concept?
Yeah, I really do. I think if you run like 10 optimal lineups in the blitz, you get like 5 different quarterbacks. It's really just kind of a matter of which one fits with all the other stuff that you want. Like there's a bunch of guys that work. I don't really see any as like, at least the ones that people are considering. I don't see any as like truly bad plays. Like I wouldn't play Goff, who I guess we have projected for like top 5 ownership. I wouldn't play Mahomes is probably a little too expensive on DraftKings, but like there's a lot of viable ones.
Is there a place that you can sort of plant your flag right now? And so this is where I'm most likely landing. Or are you kind of still debating like a 2v2 or a 3v3? Who are the guys that are sort of popping for you is amongst those 5 that you're whittling down like 1 or 2?
Yeah, I think I'm probably landing on Lamar. That's the build that I have, penciled in right now. Like he's good. He's got the rushing floor. He's facing the Jaguars. The only concern is if the game gets too out of control. If the Jaguars can meet their actual Vegas total, Lamar's going to crush. If they score 3 points, then you could run into trouble. Lamar gets pulled in the 4th quarter. They run too much, but or if they get their touchdowns through the non-Lamar running pieces, that would be bad. But I think mostly, Lamar is a great play. I think Hurts, if you're saving money like all the way down, I think Hurts at 5'9", going into Arizona, going into a dome, fast-paced game. I think Hurts is good. The guy that the blitz is kind of pushing that people aren't really considering is Tom Brady. And I can see why, but like he does not feel good. Like he's going into a dome in Atlanta facing, a below average, weak Falcons defense. It's the fastest paced game on the slate. This is a team that likes to pass. It's a defense that is, most attackable through the pass. He's got good weapons to work with, and he kind of just fits certain builds. And that's really the kind of week it is. It's like what quarterback just kind of fits with everything else.
Yeah, I think people this year they're going to have as far as they plug Brady in, it's like who to pair him with. And I can't confidently tell you who the best pairing is for Brady. And most people don't run out a quarterback like Brady, who has no legs at this point, a la carte. Like that goes against the grain. Like myself, I'm going to be playing some Hurts by himself because I think he's perfect. He doesn't necessarily, you don't need to pair him with anybody. He had like 7, 8, 9, 10 design runs last week, like 18 actual running plays. Got the 100-yard bonus on DK. And you can't really expect that's going to happen, but he did run for 1,400 yards his last season in college. And, they talk about man-to-man defense, that's a big plus for running quarterbacks, and nobody runs more man-to-man than Arizona. So I think there's a pretty good spot here for Hurts. And he's, they bumped the price up to some degree, but I don't think it's fully adjusted. And I'm pinching pennies, and I'm going to have a good bit of Hurts on DK. That's where I'm at right now in my cash games. What say you, Grant? Your thoughts on all these quarterbacks that have been thrown out there?
I hate Tom Brady. What makes you think Atlanta's a below-average defense, Cardi?
I mean, the way they project and their numbers, like I know they've been better the last few weeks or whatever, but like I still think they're a below average pass defense.
Disagree. Hammer the under in that game. I think it's already gone from 50.5 down to like 47. The Atlanta's not a bad defense. They're actually a good defense. And don't play Tom Brady because Tom Brady is going to do terrible this week. But the rest of the quarterbacks are kind of on the same page as him. Like Lamar, Hurts, Mahomes are all like the main 3 guys I'm going with. Kyler Murray, I want a guy with legs this week. Murray's been running a lot more. Hurts has obviously shown a huge amount of rushing upside. Lamar going up against Jacksonville, it's a fantastic matchup. He's been running the ball decently lately. Like all those guys are kind of the quarterbacks that I want to go with. If you're going semi off the board, like all I've really got is probably Jared Goff and Mitch Trubisky. Like Trubisky has actually put up some decent numbers throughout the course of the season. He's had multiple 20-point games. He's priced affordably at 5.5K, but I'm just not a huge fan of really anyone outside of the rushing quarterbacks. I don't really have a ton of guys that I want to pair with anyone. Like it's just not a huge week to like with all these high totals. You'd think that there'd be a lot of correlation plays, but there really isn't. And I don't fully understand it.
I like the Chicago game to go over, by the way. Go ahead, jump in here, Cardi.
What game to go over?
Trubisky. Like I think there's good value on him. Like the high end of the target tree is Robinson, Kmet, who I think is a little overrated. He's a good value. There's obviously the volume on the other side is super condensed, so there's obvious run back. So I like Trubisky stacks a lot.
Yeah, I was saying the over in the Chicago game there, Grant. What is it currently? 47. And the Tampa-Atlanta game is 49 currently. I don't know what it started at, but you said, what, 51, 52, 53?
I think it depends on what site. I mean, yesterday I was looking all over the place. DraftKings, I think, had it at 47.5. FanDuel had it at 46.5. I think BetMGM was 48. Sports betting was 49. Like it's been all over the place, but I've been able to like get different numbers based on the site pretty much all week long. It's been like I got the under of 50.5, I think, on Wednesday, and it's just kind of fluctuated all over the place depending on what site you are. There's a ton of action on it, I think, and now, yeah, it looks like it's moving up because it was super low yesterday.
I'm a little bit off Lamar this week, and I'm somebody that's been burned so many times this year. I played him a ton, like the first 10 weeks of the season, and I'm just a little. I don't think he throws it more than 200 yards. Now I know he doesn't have to. Of course, he can run for 100 on the ground, and I think the game plan is to run a ton. Now I was thinking earlier in the week he might lose some of his receivers. It looks like everybody's gonna be back for what it's worth as far as the COVID list, non-COVID list, and I think Brown's gonna give it a go, and everybody else is perfectly fine. I'm just cautious, short week as well too, and whatever shenanigans happened on Monday night as well. Maybe that really was something wrong with his arms, and his arms were cramping up. I don't know. Whatever it was, I'm pushing back a little bit, and I'm Cardi. I'm not sure if anybody mentioned Kyler Murray. Like they just maybe mentioned kind of sort of in passing, but that game, and that nice pace to both sides, and I think that there's some guys hurt in the secondary there for Philadelphia as well. Slay is one of them. I don't think he's going to play. Like that was a note I saw. Well, most likely he's not going to play, and not that he's been spectacular, but historically he's been a good player. Not a great season for him, but Kyler Murray, I know he's been sort of goofy because he hasn't been running the ball so much of late. He did run last time. He's talking about defenses playing him differently, but there was a potential shoulder injury they were talking about. But as the week has progressed, I've been more moving on to Murray. I've been moving on to Hopkins. I think Christian Kirk is kind of an interesting secondary piece. What's your thoughts as far as that game in general, if you want to focus on Murray as well?
Yeah, I like Murray quite a bit. Like he's one of the guys I think that's definitely in your cash game pool. Like if you don't quite have the money to get up to Lamar, he's totally fine. He's a guy who, like, he hasn't done a lot lately, but he hasn't been in any good spots. Like this is the best spot he's been in probably 6 weeks. It's the first time he's projected, for this many points in a long time. The legs are back as we saw last week, if that was ever even a real concern, and not just, a function of like scheme and matchup and whatever. Fast-paced game in the dome. I like Murray quite a bit.
Oh man, it's so weird. Like Russ Wilson's done nothing for like the last 5 or 6 weeks, it seems, and they won't let him do anything, and it's I guess he doesn't really have to. But
well, they have 2 healthy running backs, which means
3 now. Penny's back also, right?
Yeah.
You want to count Hyde? I'm not sure who you're counting, but yeah.
Yeah, no, and you know what Pete Carroll likes to do.
He likes to model his offense after Vince Lombardi because he says the best way to win games is to run the ball 50 times.
If you turn the ball over less, you win more. It's just science.
Yeah, we'll throw the ball in the 1-yard line there, Carroll. So it's just so strange, and Washington's got a good defense too, and it's just weird. It just seems like he hasn't been playing the last month and a half, but he's out there. And you made the point earlier, Grant, as far as nobody's going to play Tannehill because everybody's going to be on Henry, and I think that Minnesota-Chicago game is kind of sort of sneaky to some extent, and Chicago is another team that's missing guys in the secondary. At least they're expected to. We have actives and inactives come out, obviously 1:30, an hour and 30 minutes before lock, and nobody's playing those Minnesota receivers. It's just not happening. They just don't fit the slate, but for sure they're interesting in there in a dome as well. Any other quarterbacks you want to talk about here, Grant, as far as give a head nod to, or shall we move on?
I guess Tannehill's the only other one. They have almost a 30, or they have over a 30 implied team total. I think they have the highest on the slate, and no one's really talking about Tannehill too much. Looks like Stafford's going to play, so that game should be a little bit closer. There's always the chance that they have to throw the ball. Like Henry's going to be one of the chalkiest guys on the entire slate, and for good reason. But it's not like this Tennessee offense can't put up 30 points and Derrick Henry not get into the end zone. So Tannehill's the only other guy. The problem is the price. Like, do I want to do that, or do I want to pay 300 more for Murray, 800 more for Jackson, 900 more for Mahomes? I don't know.
Yeah, we did kind of just like blow by Mahomes, but like Mahomes is a cheat code. He's spectacular. It's just that the cap is a little bit tight as far as what you want to do this week. So, I'm going to certainly have my share, but like it doesn't seem like the quote unquote like math optimal play until he throws her 4 touchdowns. All right. Do want to mention before we talk about running backs, let's move on and mention prize picks. Grant, you have a couple winners for us. I'm going to throw it to you in just a second. But prize, if you use our promo code here, you get a 100% deposit bonus up to $100. Use the promo code, wait for it, Grinders, Grinders. So go ahead and check that out. And Grant, I'm not sure if you've dabbled just yet as far as prize picks, but it's just picking over, it's just picking under. What do you want to do? Who are your 2 players you picked? I have a couple as well.
McLaurin over 15.5 points. I think that's a pretty safe bet with Haskins in there. His target share that goes up to about 30%. I mean, he's trash, but in the Seattle's deep pass defense has been good. But yeah, McLaurin over 15.5, and then Ayuk over 16, just strictly based on volume. It's a full point PPR site. So
yeah,
that's the 2 overs I really like, and they're going to be chalky. So a decent way to like prize picks is a great way to kind of hedge your bets. Like if you're fading some of the chalkier options, like let's say Derrick Henry and Ayuk's, then take both of them, hit the over on both of them over on prize picks. If they end up with a crazy score, then you at least kind of get some of your winnings back.
Yeah, and mine, I got DeAndre Hopkins. I think 18 is just a little bit too low as far as his mean score. I'll take the over on that. And Brandon Cook's another one, expected back today versus injury. An injury, against a cold defense that I don't think is nearly as good as people suspect, or at least the numbers show, certainly in the first half of the season. I think that the numbers is too low. I think 13 is too low for Brandon Cooks in a full PPR. So, I think he's pretty interesting. And I don't love Cooks. I think he's actually popping in some models to some degree, but I just think that number is just a little bit off. All right, Cardi, I know you talked about him on Twitter. Feel free to quantify that in a succinct amount of time. Talk about the big dog. Talk about Derrick Henry.
I hate Derrick Henry. I hate Derrick Henry. I hate playing Derrick Henry. I hate don't playing Derrick Henry because he never does what he's supposed to do because his range of outcomes is so wide. You play him, he gets 6. You don't play him, he's 30% owned and he gets 40. And that's just Derrick Henry. But I'm playing him this week. Like I think Derrick Henry is a great play. He projects probably the highest the Blitz has ever projected Derrick Henry. It's a super high total. It's a run heavy team. They tend to run more in December. I looked into that. That's true. Obviously a good matchup with the defense. My Twitter thread, if you go check it out, it looks into like tired defenses and how they perform against the run. And Detroit is a quote unquote tired defense. So, I just think, Henry projects for 138 yards in his mean projection. That's just insanity. Obviously the touchdown equity is super high. And even though I hate playing Derrick Henry and he's super expensive, I think I'm just going to do it.
I see him. I just pulled up at the fly 118.5 as far as his over under as well as far as rushing yards. So would you take the over on 118.5? Like, is that?
Yeah, I already bet the over on Henry's yards.
You degenerate.
He's in a legal state, Grant. No judging. And
I too am in a legal state, and I too have bet the over.
And you two are degenerate?
We think we all know that.
So yeah, but I'm gonna throw this out there on FanDuel. He's not in my quote unquote like optimal cash game lineup. We live in the middle of a salary cap. You guys are aware of that, and Akers I think is cheap enough. He's a little bit cheaper there on FanDuel, comparatively speaking, as opposed to DK. And he's kind of on the outside looking in as far as my, you got to get Kamara. We'll talk about him in a second. And was it Fournette? God, I don't want to play Fournette, but he kind of sort of makes things work as well too. I want to get a Fournette take from. Well, let's knock out to Henry. I assume you like Derrick Henry, Grant, right? Well, you bet the over too, so you like him.
I mean, I like him. The problem is, so does everyone else. That's the only real problem. Like, Henry projects out as a fantastic play. It's December. He's going up against Detroit. They have a terrible run defense. Everything kind of grades out as him being a fantastic play. So I like him a lot. It's just, do I want to eat that ownership? And I likely am, but a lot of lineups where I don't have Henry, I'm going to end up with Tannehill, with A.J. Brown, with Jonnu, or with Corey Davis. It's just a spot where he is very touchdown dependent. Yes, he has a huge touchdown prop. I'm actually going to look that up right now, but it's just a spot where he should crush. Everything points towards him crushing. He's crushed 3 out of the last 4 weeks. The only time he didn't crush was a very, very negative game script where he got a fumble early and Cleveland got up to a huge lead. But there's not many ways that he ends up not playing with a lead in this one. He should end up with close to 30 touches because they're just going to run him over and over again. So everything kind of points towards him having a big game. And if you're in Colorado, over at sportsbetting.com, you can get him plus 1,200 for over 200 yards. This could be a spot where he ends up doing that. But yeah, it's just everything kind of points to him. It's just if you want to get leverage off the field, then you go with A.J. Brown, with Tannehill, with Corey Davis.
You can't bet the other way, so it's note that. But Derek Henry, I just pulled it up as far as his odds to score anytime today. You know, what would you guess? And again, you can't bet the other side, so there's probably some juice baked in.
It's minus 303 on some sites.
Okay, I'm seeing minus 335, but yeah.
Someone in chat said negative 350 somewhere.
Yeah, I think FanDuel's made negative 350, DraftKings negative 333, Sports Betting's negative 303, and MGM pulled it off the board.
Cardi, I kind of mentioned Akers. Let's talk about Akers. Let's talk about Jonathan Taylor. Let's talk about Dobbins. The three rookies are pretty interesting. Akers, you've seen ascending. We've seen his role be like 0 touches, and now all the touches, basically 85% of the snaps last week. Pretty solid matchup as well, and also the big team total, big favorite, well positioned for running backs. I believe he's at home as well too. Then there's the Dobbins one. The Dobbins one I'm a little thrown off on because I feel like he's not going to catch the ball. Like they just don't throw to him, and he's going to get. I don't think he's had more than 13 carries all season long. Now he might have a season high amount of carries for the Baltimore side, so that wouldn't surprise me. But there's plenty of options. Jackson can run the ball too. I know Ingram's been kind of sort of phased out, but Hill is lurking and Edwards is lurking as well too. I feel like you're basically paying Dobbins for like 15 carries, maybe 14 carries, maybe 16 carries. And is that enough to justify that roster spot? And feel free to bring Taylor into the conversation too, who's been great, super efficient, but he's still only like on the field like 55, 60% of the time, if that.
Yeah, I have no Dobbins interest. Like it's a 4-man bet. There's 4 guys getting carries in that backfield, plus Lamar Jackson. Dobbins doesn't really catch passes. Like he's uber touchdown dependent or big play dependent. Like the volume's just not there for him. Akers and Taylor, I have a lot more interest in. I still think they are volatile plays. These are guys that have been in 3-man committees, and this has been teams that have shown that they are willing to just change at the drop of a hat who the lead back is any given week. We talked about it on the Blitz show yesterday, like back in week 8 or 9 or whenever it was, Darrell Henderson was like one of the chalkiest running backs on the slate because the week before he got 95% of the work, and then it went back to being a committee. And Akers has been, 2 weeks now where he's gotten, like 90% of the work or something. But like, we don't know for sure that's going to continue. I think on FanDuel, he's tough to avoid. I think he's just so well priced there. You just play him. On DraftKings, I'm glad I don't have to make that choice now that we have, Kamara in our lives, because you're not playing Henry, Kamara, and Akers.
Yeah, well, yeah, I don't know why I neglected Kamara, but yeah, Kari, tell the people why they should play Alvin Kamara this week.
Because he's really good. I mean, for all the reasons you've heard on every other show you've watched this week, Alvin Kamara is the best play on the slate. He's underpriced because he was priced for playing with Taysom Hill and Michael Thomas. Now it's Breeze and no Thomas. With Taysom, he was getting like 12% of the targets. With early in the year, with Breeze and no Thomas, he was getting 26%. Like it's more than double the target share for Alvin Kamara based on the change in personnel here. And it should be a competitive game. So like it shouldn't be a game where the Saints take a big lead and we see a bunch of Latavius Murray late. Like it should be a game where Kamara is the feature piece and he's underpriced.
Yeah, great. You're talking pre-show about trying to be different. Being different would be not playing Kamara or being, I don't know what the field's at. I don't know the ownership projected up, but I imagine he's one of the highest projected owned players in the slate, including one of his teammates, probably Emmanuel Sanders. So what are you doing with Kamara, Grant? Any sort of stand, or you're with the field or what?
I'm probably just locking him in. Like he's projected at 37%, but look at his numbers early on in the season without Michael Thomas and with Drew Brees. Mm-hmm. Like he had his worst game, I think, was 19.9 points. This is a plus matchup. He's going to be heavily involved in the offense. It's going to be a high scoring affair. He should end up with 15 targets in this one. Cardi, you said you can never project someone for over 10 targets. Can you project him for over 10 targets?
He projects for exactly 10. He does not project for 15.
Yeah, no, he's going to be like there isn't many ways that he ends up getting there. If he doesn't get a touchdown, he still likely gets there. So his price tags are clearly too low. Cardi already mentioned it. He's not priced for what his role in this offense and who his quarterback is going to be this week. So I had no interest in him early on in the week with Taysom Hill. Now I'm all in on him. Like he's the chalk that I'm eating, like Cam Akers. Cardi already mentioned it. There's a lot of ways that he doesn't end up getting there. And with his ownership, you can fade him. Derrick Henry, like I said, there's ways to leverage off of him. Like Jonathan Taylor, there's ways to kind of avoid him. Leonard Fournette, like Atlanta's been a very good rush defense. Who knows what they're going to end up doing. It's Tampa Bay. Like they could end up just not playing Fournette that much. They made him inactive the other week. So there's no guarantee that he's going to go off. Jonathan Taylor, like Hines and Wilkins can vulture touchdowns. Rivers can throw it to Burton. Rivers can throw it to Hilton. Like any number of things can happen. But the one just constant that's probably going to get there in every single scenario is Kamara.
You guys ready for an uncomfortable conversation?
Yes.
Is it David Johnson?
Well, yeah, there's a couple.
Is it Leonard Fournette? I mean, I guess
it's Leonard.
Fournette too.
I was thinking Leonard Fournette, but if you want to bring in David Johnson,
I
who's
really
like the
don't
last.
want to, but I mean, I think you kind of you almost need to talk about them together, like because Fournette's going to be popular. Everyone's like, I don't want to play Fournette, but Fournette's going to be popular. Like they're even though the totals dropped or whatever, like they're more than a touchdown favorite. Fournette should maybe be the lead back. Like that's what Arians is saying. I'm not 100% confident that's the case because Arians lies and like there is Vaughn there, there is McCoy there. But 4 or 5 for Fournette is definitely too cheap. I don't think he's a must play by any means, even in cash, but he is one of the best value running backs, or he is the best value running back outside of the high guys.
Grant, when you can play a chalky player who's coming off a week where he was a healthy scratch, you just got to do it, right? Like,
I have no interest in playing Fournette today. Like, like I said, I'm very high on the Atlanta defense right now. I'm very high. Like, I have the under in this game. I have Atlanta to win. I have Atlanta +6. I don't think the Bucks really do too much here. And Fournette, like, how many times in the past have we seen Fournette do nothing, get a massive workload, but he can always break off that 60, 70, 80-yard run, which he seems to do just every time to piss me off. But like, there's no guarantee that he's going to get a huge workload in this offense. It's not a good matchup. We've seen the chalk cheap guy bust on almost a weekly basis this year. So I don't want to use Fournette if he's going to be 20% owned, which he looks like he's going to be.
Yeah, I mean, we can't.
A guy that people call Fat Net, a guy that is known for breaking off 80-yard runs, but not being able to get into the end zone from the 1-yard line. Like, how does that make any sense? Like,
oh man, yeah. So it's interesting. I was having a conversation with somebody, Carter. You kind of. I was somehow bringing Dobbins into the conversation because I think they were a similar price on FanDuel, and we were talking about it. And I was like, I feel like I can fairly predict that Dobbins is going to have like between 13 and 16 rushes. Then I'm like, well, Fournette, there's a scenario where he has like 8 opportunities, and there's a scenario where he has 25 opportunities. His range of opportunities is massive, and Ronald Jones is out, obviously. Old man McCoy looked fine last week in a change of pace role, and I can't imagine they're going to give him like any kind of bell cow role. And then there's Keyshawn Vaughn, who's not a bell cow type, far as I can tell, and it might just be a 3-man committee, and they probably all play to some degree. If you can set it over under a number of opportunities, rushes and balls thrown his way. Well, what's a reasonable? I know I think it's the range of outcomes is just huge. So how do we pinpoint this?
The blitz has 16, has 13 rushes, and a little over 3 targets, which for 4.5K is still makes him, a top 2 or 3 point per dollar running back on the slate. It's just, I mean, he's so cheap. Like, he doesn't have to be the guy that gets 80 or 90% of the carries and 15% of the targets here. Like, he can be in a committee and still meet value. That doesn't mean like I love him in a GPP sense outside of like a run back in Atlanta stacks, but in cash games, I do think there is some value there, but he's certainly not a must.
What do you have for David Johnson? Because like who's Gregory Howell? There's a person named Scotty Phillips.
Howell.
Who are these guys? It should be David Johnson's backfield, right?
David Johnson projects outside of Kamara, Henry, Fournette. He projects as the next best point per dollar guy because because volume, and that's how running backs work. And it has not worked for Texans running backs all year, but that's how it's supposed to work. Him and Duke have been targeted a combined like 20% of the time this year. So like there should be some pass game volume. He should get basically all the carries. It's not a great game script for rushing, but like, I mean, he's a good value. No one's going to want to play him. So in GPPs, if he's like 4% owned, you should probably have some David Johnson.
Yeah, I mean, he can catch too, like a thin at receiver as well still. And I would also throw Drake into the conversation of players that people just don't like the roster for whatever reason. It looks like Edmonds is going to play. At least that's the news. I believe that's a late game, the Arizona game. Yeah, it is a late game, but it looks like Chase Edmonds is going to give it a go. But I think Drake is still playable at 5.5 on DK. Thoughts there, Grant, and anybody we throw it out there? If you want to be different, just play Dalvin Cook. He's really, really good, and people aren't playing him. There's one way to be different. How about that?
I mean, I'm going to throw out a few ways to be different. Dalvin Cook, very, very simply, he can put up a massive outing in any given game. We have Chalk Kamara, we have Chalk Henry, and we have Dalvin Cook sitting there at around the same price range with almost no ownership. A guy that's put up 30 plus multiple times this year, has put up 40 plus once this year. It doesn't really matter. It's a divisional game. They're going to feed him. It's a tough matchup. That's the only reason why you don't play him. And super elite running backs in any matchup can go off for a huge game. So Dalvin Cook is a great way to pivot off the chalk. Miles Sanders, we're all worried about how much work he's actually going to get, but there's a decent shot that he ends up with 20 touches in this game. Like, it's going up against Cardinals. It's fast paced. He's a guy that's super talented. It's not a horrible matchup in terms of defense. So he's a way to kind of get off the chalk. You want to get off of Fournette, go with Ahmed. Like, he's projected at 4.7% ownership, going up against the Patriots, who do kind of slow time of possession for the other team, but they aren't a great run defense, and people run heavily going up against him. He's literally 200 more and 1/5 the ownership of Fournette. So he's a fantastic way to get off the chalk. And then one of the San Francisco running backs, like, no one wants to play them because we don't know who's going to get the workload, Wilson or Mostert. But one of them is likely to go off for a huge game going up against one of the worst run defenses in the league that plays at a very high pace. Like, San Francisco loves to run the ball. Dallas is terrible versus the run. One of these guys is likely to go off for a huge game. It's possible that both of them go off for a huge game, but no one's going to play them.
It's just great that San Francisco loves to run the football, and one of the highest projected plays, point per dollar, is receiver for San Francisco, Brandon Ayuk. He's been spectacular, tons of targets. Of course, the defense for Dallas is weak in the secondary as well. I don't think the price is fully adjusted to how well Ayuk has been of late, and also the matchup with we know Devo's out, obviously Kittle's out. Ayuk is the clear number one on this team. Cardi, is that one of your favorite places to start, or do we not even have the funds to get Ayuk in our cash games necessarily?
Yeah, he's the guy I feel worst about fading. I like him, but I'm not able to get there with Kamara, Henry, and I'm prioritizing Kelsey, who we'll talk about. I just can't get to Ayuk also. And of those four, he's the one I guess I'm the most comfortable sacrificing. Like, we talked about why Kamara and Henry are good. We'll talk about Kelsey. Ayuk, I think, has the most paths to, like, not a smash game, like just an okay game or a flop game, because even though the matchup's good, like, Dallas plays at a fast pace, but they're not playing at the, world-beating fast pace they were earlier this year with Dak. Since Dak's been out, they're like top 10 in pace. They're not like first by a mile the way they were. And as bad, the defense is bad, and there's extra volume without Debo, but that does mean a little bit of extra attention also for Ayuk, so efficiency will be down a little bit. And this is a team that likes to run first and foremost, that has, Mostert back now, two like legit good running backs. So they'll be able to run without Debo, without Kittle. Like, how much are they really expecting to pass? It's Nick Mullins. So, like, I do think there are plenty of paths for Ayuk not to smash. That doesn't mean I don't like him. Like, I do think of the non, 3K range receivers, like, he's the best value receiver for sure. I just can't find a way to make him work.
Grant, your thoughts as far as Ayuk, and then let's bring the conversation as far as the New Orleans cheapies. Manny Sanders at 4.2K on DK. I think he's 5.5 on FanDuel. Just makes things work. And elevated to, I guess Kamara is their number one target, but Manny Sanders you'd assume will be second, if not him. Yeah, he's probably the de facto number two here. And They're expected to be playing from behind to some degree against KC. Although that line looks like it's pinched to 2.5, if I'm seeing that correctly, which is interesting. It was at 3 basically most of the week. And then Traquan Smith, proud of UCF. There you go. He's a 3.2K on DK as well. Thoughts on Ayuk, Grant, and then bringing these New Orleans receivers that are going to be, especially Manny, super popular.
I mean, yeah, we don't really know if any of them are going to end up going off, but the chances are likely it's going to be a high-scoring affair. We look at Manny Sanders' numbers earlier on the season. Without Michael Thomas, he was a real disappointment the first 2 weeks, and after that, he was putting up 15 points pretty much every single week. It's a decent matchup, but it's just going to be a high-scoring affair. So, yeah, Manny Sanders, both him and Traquan, great plays. Traquan's going to come in at less ownership, even though he's $1,000 cheaper. I think that he's the better play because Manny Sanders' chalk could easily fail in any given matchup. So both of them are fine, but like the interesting part is that T.Y. Hilton is going to come in at chalk because of what he's done for the last 3 weeks. It's just super interesting. He hasn't had more than 7 targets outside of against Houston and against Cleveland earlier on in the year. There's no guarantee that he's going to end up going off. He's just been getting touchdowns in recent weeks, and I don't know if he's good chalk. But like there's a lot of better plays. Like with everyone paying up at running back, there's a lot of premium wide receivers that can absolutely go off today.
Yeah, that's the BVP matchup, by the way. Hilton crushes Houston, and Kiki Kuti said his 3 greatest games of his life. Short sample, obviously, all against Indianapolis. So, I think he's sort of interesting as well, too. Also, his price is still pretty reasonable. Cardi, speak to the New Orleans guys.
I mean, they're the best value wide receivers on the slate, like especially, I mean, not even especially, both of them. I mean, Sanders is the one that I like more. When Thomas was out earlier in the year, he was getting 21% of the targets. They're in a dome. They should actually be playing from behind against the Chiefs. So like 4.2 for Sanders with Breeze back now. He's really cheap, and Traquan for 3.2 is basically the next best play. Like as of right now, I'm playing both in cash games, which that's just kind of how I have to do it if I want Kelsey, Kamara, Henry, and Lamar. Like you just have to go cheap wide receivers. So I think both these guys are fantastic plays.
It's 3 Saints, but also it's worth noting that the salary you're delegating. It's not like you're spending up on 3 guys in the same team, and I think that matters. How much you really need to squeeze out of those guys. And in between those 2 prices.
The other thing to note that I think a lot of people kind of gloss over, and it's not that important, but Deontay Harris hit the IR yesterday. That just means, the targets could be a little more concentrated up top unless like they want to start throwing the ball to Tommy Lee Lewis or like, whoever.
Little Jordan Humphrey.
Little Jordan Humphrey's on the roster. Yeah. But I kind of think Sanders and Traquan are a little more locked in now.
I would assume so. I think Will Jordan was a thing in college, but I don't know if he's done anything in the pros just yet. But all right, let's work our way down. Grant mentioned T.Y. Hilton. I've been a non-believer, 31-year-old, speed burner, usually on the wrong side of 30 at chalk. I know he's been great, but he's been kind of lucky and efficient as well, too. I think he's fine, but I'm going to have less in the field for sure. Manny Sanders, 33-year-old Manny Sanders. So he's not a high upside guy. He's going to be super, super chalky, but it does make a ton of sense, obviously, in cash if nothing else. Cardi, who else as far as tournament wise? Like I love Hopkins. I think Hopkins is an awesome play today, and it's playing the slate backwards to some degree because people want to spend up on those running backs, Kamara and Henry, for good reason. Minnesota, the Minnesota receivers, I don't think are going to be owned at all. As far as I can tell, it's certainly less than 10%. I like Jefferson a little more than Thielen. And Robinson as a run back in that game, I think is pretty interesting too. Thoughts on those guys? And unless you want to throw out there that's in that sort of territory.
I like the Texans wide receivers and Akers at tight end, and I think they're going to go overlooked because you kind of mentioned it. Like people have this perception of the Colts defense is like this really good defense, and they're kind of overrated. And like Cooks is back and healthy now, and there's no Fuller, so like he should have a pretty both these guys should have 20% target shares. Cooks should be 25% probably, and it's the 3rd pass heaviest offense in football, playing as an underdog in a dome with a really good quarterback. So like I think people are really sleeping on the Texans, and you can run it back with Taylor. You get some leverage off of that Hilton chalk. I really like them in GPPs.
Grant, jump in here, and then I also want to how do we pay for Tyreek? Like, how do we make that work? Because you're supposed to get some Tyreek, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's really simple. You play Ahmed and you play Michael Gallup.
Oof. Who's the first one you said? Who am I playing?
Ahmed.
The running back from no, I'm not playing him. The running back from Miami.
You mean the guy that's probably going to get the majority of the shares that they give a lot of work to in the goal line, going up against a defense that forces the run and who is not good against the run, and is the same price pretty much as the chalk Leonard Fournette, who we don't know if he's going to get more than 5 carries.
I don't want to. Cardi, you have a take.
You want to play Fournette, but you don't want to play Ahmed at the same price.
I don't want to be clear. I don't want to play Fournette. I'm more willing to play Fournette. There's an understanding. There's a difference in the phrasing, but that Miami situation I think is pretty murky. We don't know who's playing any position for the Dolphins today. I guess we know some of them, but you know what I mean. Carter, you have a thought on that? You want to go back as far as the Miami?
I think GPP's Ahmed is interesting because if he gets the kind of workload he was getting earlier this year when he was like healthy, then he could completely smash. The problem is back then Washington and Breida weren't active, and they are today. Mm-hmm. So I think there is some more uncertainty, but I do definitely see the upside on him.
Yeah, it's potentially like the same cluster that Baltimore has, but like to a different degree, like a less appealing degree.
I mean, how often have they actually not just given one guy the brunt of the workload?
That's the thing. Like they've done it. They've done it with Gaskin. They did it with Ahmed once Gaskin went out. I don't think their running back roster has been as full as it is this week in quite a while. So I think maybe that could play into it. But again, I do think there's a real chance that Ahmed just gets like 75% of the work.
Ridley, I'm not really on the Atlanta side today. I know Gage is popping for some people too, and I understand he's pretty cheap. And no Julio. I'll let you speak that in a second there, Cardi. But my thought is that like I just don't think Atlanta is going to do. They're not going to be efficient today. I think Tampa's going to mostly shut them down. I think they're starting the game at one dimension, and they're gonna have to pass 40 times, and it's not going to work out well for him. Maybe Gage gets a garbage touchdown or something like that, but I'm on the side. I know Grant said earlier he likes Atlanta. I think Tampa wins this game fairly handily. Slide into the DMs, Grant. Feel free. Save some juice. But Cardi, talk to me about Gage.
I mean, basically, it's that they're at home. They're in a dome. They're a team that leans on the pass side. That is a pretty big underdog, so they should be passing. Tampa Bay is more attackable through the air, so you would expect them to maybe try to lean that way a little bit more. And there's no Julio Jones, and they just don't seem efficiently priced for it. Ridley obviously is. Ridley's super expensive. But if you want to, put your hand in the dirt, I forget who writes the article, the matchup article at RG. Like Ridley has the toughest matchup. Like the Bucs, I guess, have shown in the past to like try to double team, top wide receivers like this. So I think that makes guys like Gage and Hurst really interesting at their prices, where even if they don't do that to Ridley, there's still values. So they're really cheap, and so I think they're definitely good for GPPs, and I think Gage in particular is a very viable cash play.
All right, jump in here, Grant.
Yeah, no, I love Gage today. Like he's going to get a massive amount of volume. Like he's 4.7K. He's not coming in at huge projected ownership. I think we have him pegged at 6%. It really doesn't make sense to me. Everyone wants to pay down slightly for Emmanuel Sanders. So it just makes sense to pivot off of Sanders over to Gage just because they're probably going to end up with close to the same amount of volume. Like Gage is clearly the number 2 in that offense, and Sanders is the number 2 in the Saints offense. So I really like him as a play. Like other guys that are going to come in at low ownership that could easily end up crushing, either of the Rams guys, like A.J. Brown. Even if Derrick Henry crushes, like the last 3 games where Henry has crushed, A.J. Brown has averaged over 20 points. Like there's no guarantee that they can't both go off. They have a 30 implied team total. A.J. Brown is expensive, so it's an easy way to get a different lineup. So he's on there and going to come in at very low ownership. McLaurin, we saw the numbers he was putting up earlier on the season with Haskins. They were good. He was putting up over 20 points almost every single game. He had 30% target share. He was getting over 10 targets a game. They're probably going to have to pass because they're going to be behind going up against Seattle. Like it's just interesting, the ownership, how everyone's going to be on the same few guys. And any one of these guys can go off for a 30-plus point game.
I mean, the funny thing to me is that Terry and Ayuk are literally the same play, almost the same price. I think you can make a case that Terry's the better play. And he's going to be, half the ownership, a third of the ownership? I always love Terry. But especially now that Haskins is back and we don't have to worry about Alex Smith just not throwing him the ball when he's open. Terry's one of the best plays on the slate.
Cardi, one of the forks in the slate is deciding what to do with Kelsey. If you're going to spend up on Kelsey or spend all the way down. And one of the cash iterations I built last night, I guess, is I got Terry and Ayuk in my cash game lineup at the cost of, and I'm sure you've done this all. Yeah, you've done this back and forth, and you're kind of it's 51-49, and yeah. So I have Terry and I have Ayuk, we both love, and it's hard to get if you're going to spend up on a guy like Kelsey, but. So let's speak to that fork in the road conversation as far as do we spend all the way up on Kelsey or do we flat out punt it? And I think it's different, obviously, on FanDuel versus DK. It's easier to get Kelsey on FanDuel than it is on DK, at least for me.
Yeah, if you're not playing Kelsey on FanDuel, like give up because you really need to be playing Kelsey on FanDuel. On DraftKings, there is that conversation. I want to get to Kelsey, but I can totally see like Ayuk and Terry instead of Kelsey, like feels good. There's plenty of cheap tight ends you can just punt with. But I really like Kelsey. Like, I'm not a big narrative guy, obviously, but the narrative is he could be the leading receiving guy this year in the NFL as a tight end. And you have to think that the Chiefs probably want to try to get him there, especially because he's, one of their best options or their best option, however you want to slice it, to begin with. Like, they like throwing the ball. He's amazing. They're in a dome this week. And it's going to be probably one of the closest games the Chiefs have played all year against a good Saints team. So like they should have every opportunity to just throw the ball all game. And even though he's expensive, I kind of have a hard time not playing Kelsey.
All right. How are you handling that situation, Grant?
I'm going to end up playing a decent amount of Kelsey. I really like stacking up. Like I already said, I'm going all in on Kamara. So stacking it up with either Hill or Kelsey just is the easy way to do things. Tight end is not great this week. Like there's really not a ton of guys I want to play. Komet's probably going to be a little bit chalky. So is Cook. They're both fine options. They're both going to get volume. They both have a decent amount of upside, and neither one of them costs too much. But outside of that, like go back to Akers and just hate my life again another week. Thomas, I'm not sure if he's going to end up with the same volume with Haskins under center. Irv Smith is a great play and is going to come in at fairly low ownership. But tight end's just really not a lot to love this week. And so paying up for Kelsey when everyone's going to be paying up for both Henry and Kamara, and in all likelihood, they could be paying up for Cook, or they could pay Akers at 6.6K, and just makes it tough to pay 8K for Kelsey, a guy who's pretty much a wide receiver and is one of the best in the league. Like, who would you rather have, Hill and Irv Smith Jr., or Kelsey and Sanders, or Kelsey and Gallup, or Kelsey and any one of these other cheap wide receivers? The cheap wide receivers are better than cheap tight ends, so it just makes sense to pay it for Kelsey, who has just as much upside and has consistently put up huge numbers. Plus, Andy Reid's just passing the ball at such a massive rate so far this season. So, Kelsey's an absolutely fantastic play. I'm right there with you, Cardi. I love Kelsey this week.
The point you made about the cheap wide receivers being better than the cheap tight ends, I think is the point to really hammer home there. Like you have Traquan, Sanders, Mims, Gallup, like there's a bunch of them. And they're better than Akers, Komet, Cook. Hurst I would throw into that conversation too. Like I think he's a really good value tight end, but not as good as these cheap wide receivers. So that's kind of my lean with all this.
Who's your favorite non-Saint that's a cheapie as far as receiver? Because I think mine's Gallup.
I think mine is Mims, but it's a toss-up between him and Gallup.
Yeah, and I have an irrational love for Cole Kmet, so like I'm a little bit more comfortable playing him instead of Kelsey. And again, I love Kelsey. I'm not here to talk to anybody out of playing Travis Kelsey, and I'm for sure going to roster some myself. And I'm not sure if we know if Graham's going to play or not. Again, actives an hour and a half before the show afterwards is going to let you guys know what's going on there. But either way, like Kmet is like, I know Graham got the touchdown last week, but Kmet to me has clearly separated himself. And I know Grant was making a joke about Jordan Akins, but his drop touchdowns are baked into that price, 2.8. If you can't find the money for Kmet, or if you want to be a little bit different because people are just tired of Akins, another UCF guy, I'm for sure okay with that if you're pinching pennies, and I think it's a reasonable thing to do in tournaments. You got anything else? Andrews, anybody else that's worth talking about here? Is it just high-low, and that's that, Grant, as far as tight ends?
It's pretty much just high-low. Like Andrews is fine, like especially if you're going to pair him up with Lamar, if he ends up getting there, probably ends up with at least one passing touchdown. Andrews has a huge market share, so I don't mind that at all. And I'm trying to place a bet right now. Shout out to Yasmin in chat for pointing it out, but Henry over 75 yards and a touchdown at minus 138. That seems absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, that's going to happen, right, Cardi? He's going to score a touchdown and get 78 yards?
75.
Yeah, that sounds like a pretty solid bet to me.
Yeah, I mean, you're laying a little bit of juice, but I feel pretty good about that.
I'm not laying any juice. Realistically, that parlay, they're correlated, and it should be around minus 240.
Okay, it's a parlay. I gotcha. All right.
Well,
I thought it was something they packaged together for some reason, but yeah, that doesn't.
It's essentially a parlay. It's a custom parlay that they have. So that was just a free $500. Hooray!
There you go. All right, there you go. You're gonna track down Yusman if that doesn't work out for whatever reason. Hey, we see you guys on YouTube. You see him on YouTube. Like, subscribe, hit the notifications. I do appreciate that. We'll be here for the next 10 minutes or so before we step aside and make way for Tambo. Tambo's going to be taking over and he's going to be showing off the lineup HQ, some of the tools here at RG, and Devin, our fabulous multitasking producer, has been showing it off in the background as well too. A lot of our ownership as far as what's going on. And, we've been talking about tight ends, and tight ends are sort of magically popping up in the background of the screen. If you want to use that tool and all the other tools and all the other articles and all the videos here at RG, you can use them at your own leisure. How do you do that? We're now offering subscribers the option to select specific sports for their premium subscription, or to select the combo premium, which includes pretty much every single sport with the exception of NASCAR. Viewers that are watching right now, you get the promo link. It's going to go ahead and drop in chat for you guys. $10 off your first month of either the combo, which includes college football, MMA, soccer, esports, much more, or you can get the a la carte single entry premium for RG. One specific sport you just want basketball starts up on Tuesday night. You can get that as well. $10 off. Promo dropped in chat for you guys. And also drop some questions. We're going to have a few minutes for questions for sure, because now we're up on defenses. And Cardi, I know you don't like to talk about defenses, but give us at least 30 seconds. Give us a taste.
I mean, I think the Seahawks will probably be one of the chalkier defenses, and they're the one that's popping in the blitz the most. Against Haskins, low total. They're reasonably enough priced. But I mean, defense is stupid. Play whatever defense fits. I've legit considered a Jacksonville defense build because it does let you fit Kamara, Henry, Kelsey, and Ayuk. And I'm like, it's defense. Why don't I just do this? So really that's kind of how I feel about defense as a whole. Just whatever fits with what you're building is fine.
It's funny. You mentioned the Seahawks. They're 3-1 on DK. I like the Bucks at 3K. And it's so
Bucks
weird.
are good too.
It's so weird. I feel like I'm going to have some head-to-heads where I'm essentially going up against, it's my defense, the Bucks, versus your defense, the Seahawks. And that's my head-to-head. I mean, I think that might happen. And I lean the Bucks over the Seahawks. It's super close. And, that's what we want. One-dimensional. We want slow-moving quarterbacks on a drop back, 40 times, force the pass. A team that's willing to put pressure on the quarterback. That's how you get the pick sixes. That's how you get the sack sixes. So I know Haskins, he's obviously vulnerable too to that. All right, Grant, what do you have for me as far as defenses? And feel free to give me one of your favorite stacks today as well.
The only two defenses you need to play are the Seahawks and the Falcons. The Falcons, if you want to pay up for guys, the Falcons are 2.3K. Brady is not great. He's going to probably drop back a decent amount. They're going to be behind because the Falcons are going to win this game. Yeah, Dean will make a bet after this. But, yeah, no, it's the Falcons and it's the Seahawks are the two defenses I want to play.
I like Falcons too.
All right. Well, yeah.
I talking up the Bucks the entire show, and then, I like the Falcons defense.
You can like the defense too. It's just, it doesn't even matter. They're cheap.
Yeah, and they give 25 points. Who cares? That's, have you heard the defenses are random, Grant?
Never heard that.
Defenses don't matter. Have you heard that one or no?
I have never heard that. No one has ever said that on Twitter or anywhere else.
Cardi, give me two correlation plays. Give me your kind of sort of chalky correlation, and if you have one if you can sort of summon your tournament brain. Give me an off the board. This may happen and people aren't going to be on a tournament play.
All right, so the chalky one is obviously any Saint with Kelsey, and then the off the board ones. I think any of the Houston pass catchers, Cooks, Kuti, Akins with Jonathan Taylor. And even though Ayuk is going to be popular, I think you can do like a little secondary stack with him and Zeke, and I don't think anyone's going to play it that way.
Grant, see it and raise it.
I don't have really any great secondary stacks, I guess, or any great. I mean, Cooks and Allen Robinson. I guess that's my best one. I mean, or you can just stack up the New Orleans game anyway.
Cardi, Minnesota receiver, pick one. Who do you prefer? Or is it like a coin toss?
It's basically a coin toss. I guess I lean Jefferson at this point, but it's super close.
Rams, same question. Same answer? Oh.
I don't think Cardi knows he's supposed to speak. It's Cup. It's Cup.
He just took us. He's like the Kermit, like, that's not my business thing. I think that's what just happened there. All right, there's some questions that are loading in my chat as well too. Sticking around for a couple more minutes for you guys. Grant, Tennessee stack with Tannehill and Brown. Do you run it back with Hawkinson or Swift? Do you have to run it back one of those guys?
I don't think you have to, but I have no problem with doing that. Like, yeah, if you're planning on Detroit keeping this game close, it's probably like you can run back with Jones, Swift, or Hawkinson. Like Swift can get done in the passing game too.
Cardi, question in chat, and I think that they have something wrong here because they're saying cash DraftKings 1v1 Kelsey or Hopkins, and if you're selling Kelsey or Hopkins, that means you're playing two tight ends.
And
you shouldn't be playing two tight ends.
I mean, I guess you could play two tight ends, but that means you're playing, one of these cheap tight ends like Komet or Akins or somebody. And I think at that point you should play one of the cheap wide receivers. But I do prefer Kelsey to Hopkins.
Yeah, we got Alex in chat. Alex, super smart here, contributor here at RG as well. He's talking about Cardi. He says he's playing the Jags defense on DK, and that's what got him Mahomes because sometimes
it works.
You got to make some
Jags
concessions.
defense last week was in like a terrible spot, and they scored a touchdown and like 20 points or something, and it just that can happen with defenses. So
I got a twofer for you, Grant. Hopkins and Traquan versus Terry and Fournette. DK.
Hopkins and Traquan.
Which one of us is in the middle, by the way? It says, dude in the middle thinks he knows it's all. He's a big dummy. Who's the big dummy?
I mean, like, if I had to guess, I'd say you.
Devin, who's in the middle? Tell us who's in the middle.
It's me.
Grant's in the middle. Yeah, Grant's a big dummy. Oh, I love it. All right, so this is a Cardi question. Well, can you rank Ahmed, Gage, and Kirk? Christian Kirk. Gage and Ahmed.
Yeah, I think I go Gage, Ahmed, and
there we go.
Did I mispronounce that? I apologize.
I mean, it's phonetically it looks like Ahmed, but I'm pretty sure he pronounces it Ahmed.
Taylor or Akers on FanDuel Cash? That's a tough call, but I have a slight lean to Akers. If you want to answer that one, Cardi, by all means.
I'd go Akers too.
Grant, you would take on that, Taylor versus Akers? I mean, it wouldn't help if you went the other way.
For Cash, I'd probably go Akers.
If it's the guy that says you're a big dummy, though, he's just going to go the opposite. Like, whatever you say.
That's fine.
I don't know why I'm focusing on that so much. What do we think of Hanson on Houston? I still can't pick Hanson out of a lineup. I can't. I'm not playing Hanson. Like, he's like the third option on the team.
Too cute. I like Houston, but there's no they're not going to be that owned, so there's no reason to go with Hanson. Just play.
Was that a pun? You're doing too cute for a Houston guy and not named Kiki Cute? Anything else we're going to close strong and get out of here? Let's see. We have one more for Grant, for the smart guy he knows it all. So Grant's going to answer this question correctly. Christian Kirk or Lamb in tournaments? Who do you have for us?
Christian Kirk. Like we didn't really talk about him, but I mean, he's shown huge upside earlier on the season before Murray got injured. He can absolutely do it again. And he's pretty much the same price as Sanders, so it's a decent pivot.
We can't answer every question. Again, we're going to turn this over to Tambo in just a second, and later on, crunch time, they're going to answer as many questions as possible too. Take you guys all up to lock, so stick around. No need to go away. One more. Let's give one more for the road card. This is a good one. DK, McLaurin or Akers?
Oh, it's Terry.
Oof, that's tough. I like them both, but all right. He was Derek Carty. He was the Mr. Know-It-All in the middle, the center square. That was Grant. That was Grant Neefer. I was Dean. Crush today. Win $1 million or win something. Have a good time. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe. We're out of here. Holler. Take care.
Fantasy Bar, 6 of my favorite plays for big week 15 on FanDuel and DraftKings, including a workhorse running back I think is way too cheap, a skinny stack for you to provide some value, my favorite quarterback play on the slate, and of course, my beast of the week. Who is it? Belly up to the Fantasy Bar and find out. Welcome in, guys. Week 15 edition Beers Daily Fantasy 6-pack back here in the friendly confines of the Fantasy Bar. Once again, providing 6 of my favorite plays across both FanDuel and DraftKings. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. Before we get started on this week's video, guys, as always, one simple request. Make sure you hit that thumbs up button. Guys have been doing a great job with that. I greatly appreciate it. That's the tip jar here in the Fantasy Bar. Also, make sure you subscribe to the channel and get notified when the videos are coming out. All right, let's dive in before we look at week 15. As always, we take a quick look back at week 14. A pretty solid week here in week 14. A few guys outproduced what we thought they would do. David Montgomery, Mike Gesicki, all very productive. Brandon Ayuk, even Taysom Hill, not bad. And even the guys that didn't do as well, Robinson Thomas, didn't kill our lineup. So all in all, a very good week 14. But as always, we turn the page to week 15. So let's get started. I promised you a workhorse running back at a discounted price. We're going to go to Los Angeles. We're going to roll with Cam Akers of the Rams. So Akers certainly going to have some ownership, no doubt. And there's a few reasons why I really like him. I'm not going to shy away. It's not going to be a 40, 50% owned situation. There's a lot of good running back plays, especially in this price range, especially as rookies. But the reason I like Cam Akers so much, first of all, the split of the backfield. This has been a confusing backfield throughout the first 13 weeks of the season, but it was very clear in week 14 who the lead dog was in this backfield, and it's clearly the rookie they drafted to be this guy in Cam Akers. 29 carries in week 14. In fact, 29 of the 31 carries went to Cam Akers. So we're getting a workhorse under 7,000 on both sides. So that's another appealing factor, is to get a guy that's going to touch the ball that many times at these prices. Not only that, but the Rams, massive favorites in this game. They're at home. They're 17-point favorites. They have a 31 projected team total. This is exactly the kind of spot that we look to for our running backs. Home favorites here. And I expect them to get a big dose of work here against the Jets. Yes, the Jets, much worse against the pass. I have no issues building some rosters around guys like Jared Goff, Robert Woods if he goes, Cooper Kupp in that passing game against this Jets secondary. No doubt. If I don't have Cam Akers, that's probably the direction I'm going to go in a lot of lineups, but I want Cam Akers to be a big part of my build here. Yes, the Jets are worse against the pass, but still a bottom 10 team in the league in giving up fantasy points to the running back position. Cam Akers looked electric last week. I think that continues this week. Buy low while we can here on Cam Akers. All right, let's go to the tight end position. We're going to spend some money here on Baltimore tight end Mark Andrews. Now, Travis Kelce, obviously, the guy, if I could cram him into all my lineups and make it work, I would, but we live in the world of a salary cap, as my boy Dean 78904 would say. So to save some money here, nice fallback option with a guy like Mark Andrews. We know he's going to get the ball in this Baltimore offense, 22 targets over the last 3 weeks. Hollywood Brown on the COVID list as of this recording. Now, he may be back, but the point is they may be down some pass catchers, and even if they're not here against Jacksonville, Andrews gives you that beautiful combination of a floor. We know the targets are going to be there, and also gives us that 2-touchdown upside at a terrible tight end position. And that has just driven us nuts throughout the season. This Jacksonville defense, we know is bad. We know Baltimore's going to put up points. Lamar Jackson looked great last week, and I'm expecting Mark Andrews to be a big part of this offense. Whether or not Brown's in there or not does not matter to me. Save some money here and roster Mark Andrews this week against the Jacksonville Jaguars. All right, moving on. Let's go to the running back position. We're going to get a little controversial here. We're going to go to San Francisco, and we're going to roll with Jeff Wilson Jr. of the Niners. Now, this one can play out a lot of different ways. Obviously, Raheem Mostert, the domino here. And either way, I like Jeff Wilson here, and I'll lay it out why. If Mostert is out or limited, that's going to be great things for Jeff Wilson. I'm expecting him to lead that backfield in a big way. If Mostert is in, if he's available, well, that's going to lower ownership and interest in a guy like Jeff Wilson. So in either scenario, I am interested here. Now, if Mostert's in, Wilson would be more of a FanDuel play for me because of that touchdown upside. We'll talk about that here momentarily. But if he's out, I like Wilson on both sides. We talked about the touchdown upside. Wilson has really become that. Even when Mostert's in there, this is the guy getting the ball around the goal line. hey, that's good news here against this Dallas defense, which has been terrible against the run. But Wilson also gives you some sneaky upside in the passing game, has had a handful of targets in each of the last few weeks. So regardless of how this plays out, I have interest in Jeff Wilson. Why? Mainly because Dallas, an absolutely terrible team against the run. One of the league's worst rushing defenses. In fact, giving up over 175 rushing yards per game over the last 4 weeks have the Dallas Cowboys. So we know the Niners want to establish the running game here, and I think they do that in a big way, and I'm expecting Jeff Wilson to be a big part of that. We're going to go big here, not only count for 1 touchdown. I think Jeff Wilson gives you a multi-touchdown day here against the Dallas Cowboys, and all of that under 6,000 on FanDuel and just a tick over 5,000 on DraftKings, one of my favorite value plays on the week. All right, let's go to the other side of that game. I like this game. We're going to save you some more money at the wide receiver position with Michael Gallup of the Cowboys. Now, Dallas, one of those teams. They have 3 great pass catchers, and I know this offense has not been very good since Dak Prescott went down, but these are still 3 very viable pass catchers. And I think what happens a lot of weeks, people shy away because they don't know which guy to roster. Well, when I face these situations, it's never the same answer. When I get a guy like Michael Gallup, who's seeing the ball a lot lately with Andy Dalton. I mean, we're talking about almost 8 targets per game over the last 3 weeks at these kind of prices. I mean, 3,500 on DraftKings is an absolute steal for a guy of Michael Gallup's caliber. You got to imagine Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, see more of the big coverage there with the San Francisco 49ers. And Gallup should be the guy that's kind of forgotten about and makes for that great skinny stack. And what are we talking about? Just a guy on each side. You know, so we don't always have to go bonkers and stack up a game with 3, 4, 5 pieces. Sometimes it's as simple as I'm expecting Jeff Wilson to have a big day. I'm expecting San Francisco to do well in this game. And that's going to force Dallas to throw the ball probably more than they want to, which could lead to a big game for Michael Gallup. And we've certainly seen some big games out of him. Now, it's only a couple this season. I'm not going to say he's done it every single week, but this guy's given a 7, 8x return multiple times this year. And we're talking about that kind of return. Now we're talking about contending and potentially winning GPPs here. So you add it all up, he's too cheap. I'm expecting Dallas to throw more in this game. Michael Gallup going to be a big part of my builds this week, especially on DraftKings at just 3,500. All right, moving on to our next pick. We're going to go to the quarterback position. We're going to roll with Tom Brady of the Buccaneers. Now, it would have been easy to come on here and say Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes. So that would have been way too easy. I want to get you a guy a little bit below that in ownership here. And I love this spot for Tom Brady. Let's start with the consistency. I know a lot of people ready to write old Noodle Arm off, but multiple touchdown passes for Tom Brady now in 10 of his 13 games this season. We know Atlanta's defense, yes, they've been much improved. Yes, they've been very good against the run, but still ranked dead last in fantasy points allowed to the quarterback position over the course of the season here. And surprisingly, Tom Brady been much better on the road. I know this is a very short sample here, but pretty drastic differences here. About 50 passing yards per game, averaging 8 more DraftKings points per game on the road. And in fact, 4 of his 6 biggest games have come away from Raymond James Stadium. So Tom Brady really feeling comfortable on the road. Indoor game here against the defense. Again, yes, improved, but I think Tom Brady going to have success a lot of ways. You can pair him up with those multiple Tampa Bay Buccaneers pass catchers. Love this spot for Tom Brady this week against Atlanta. So, all right, it's time to take a look at my favorite play for Week 15. But before we do that, guys, as always, we're going to say thank you to you guys, the loyal bar patrons, with our Beast of the Week contest. Absolutely free to play. Make sure you've hit the thumbs up button on the video, and all you got to do, get in the comment section below and guess fantasy points on DraftKings for my favorite play for Week 15. The closest guess is going to win themselves a free week of Rotogrinders Premium or a free Rotogrinders t-shirt. So let's wrap it up. Week 15 for my favorite play. You know, Matt, the Beast of the Week. All right, this time we owe you one more wide receiver. We've saved you money in a lot of spots so we could spend up here on Calvin Ridley.
What's up, everyone? Tyler Tamboline here, aka Toe Tag and Tambo, back for another edition of the Sunday Lineup HQ show this week for Week 15 in the NFL. I see a lot of questions in the chat already. A lot of people chatting it up with us. Appreciate it. All the support. Got my guy here, Eric B. Bimefor. What's up, Eric?
Not much, man. We were talking before the show, and I did a show earlier this week, and I was like, I think I hate this slate. This slate's terrible. There's no, there's no all the value sketchy. And then we come into Sunday, and honestly, I kind of love it. I think there's a lot more really awesome tournament spots that we'll get into than I think or than I thought a few days ago, and probably a lot more than like the field thinks. There is really not a lot of value, but that opens up a lot of really exciting tournament plays, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I'm with you. I was talking about it since Thursday with the guys, Killer B and Kirkwood on the Tourney Takes pod. I was just saying, I like this because, I joked about it being, the dad life and everything, the three little bears, the porridge, not too hot, not too cold, just right. 11 games is just right for me, man. I don't like 8 games as much. It's normally going one direction and everyone's all, so there's enough opportunity, but it's not ideal. And then 13, there's just so many angles and it just feels incredibly tough to get the nuts to get to the top of these large field GPPs. So I'm excited here with 11 games and a lot of different ways you can go. We'll get right into it. There's some huge tournaments out there today. I know FanDuel's got the $250 with the million up top. It's been a popular tournament every year, sort of their online fan championship, if you want to call it that. And then DraftKings just has a phenomenal bigger bankroll tournament. All the tournaments are good, though, this week. The $10, the $100, they all have much better payout structures than I've seen in the past. And then, of course, you and I were talking before the show, the $1,500 main event with 3,700 people. It's basically a wildcat on steroids, the 333. Just bump the buy-in just under 5X, but the payout structure is phenomenal. So I know you've got a few in there. I've got a few in there. Going to get that thing rolling. We'll start it off at running back. Things changed, right? It was earlier in the week, so we had a lot of time to adapt. But at the start of the week, you would have said Kamara's dust. There's no way he's playing anymore. Like it's Taysom Hill time. All this stuff's going on. And now, not only is Drew Brees coming back, but then Michael Thomas is ruled out. So here we are. We'll start with the chalk, Eric. We've got Alvin Kamara at the top at almost 40% ownership, followed by Cam Akers, Derrick Henry, Leonard Fournette, a little bit of love for JT, Jonathan Taylor at the bottom, and then Kenyon Drake at the bottom as well for 5,500 is a nice little value. So what are you doing with all these guys here with the chalk at running back?
So my plan going in, it's kind of two-pronged, really. I personally like the way that I play with, 1 to 10, somewhere in that range entries. I just can't get away from a guy like Kamara. I was talking to Squirrel Patrol the other day on our show, and I think people see this slate. You don't see a bunch of like value, like what people would perceive as value, right? There's not the 4K running back. There's not the 3K flat wide receiver. There's some cheaper wide receivers that are good plays, but there's not just like, Jamal Williams for 4,000, right? We don't have that. But Kamara is like what I would call the value of the slate. Without Michael Thomas, with Drew Brees back in this matchup, it's both a great running matchup and a great receiving matchup for him. They're going to have to score because the Chiefs score on everybody. Mm-hmm. It's just, it's Kamara's a 9K player, maybe more. We could argue he's the highest projection of any running back on the slate, right there with the Henrys and Dalvins of the world. So he's like the one guy that I feel like so passionately about being just way underpriced that I'm not getting away from Kamara, but I am the one caveat I'll put to it is I think maintaining some flexibility on this slate is important. If you're playing Kamara and you have, a decent exposure to the late games, it does give you the flexibility based on how things go to pivot to something like a Latavius Murray, or just pivot off of Kamara. Maybe you come down to Miles Sanders or someone like that allows you to kind of get some leverage if things don't break perfectly for you in the early games. So that's kind of my caveat answer, that I think Kamara is just like too big of a lock for me to go in planning to fade, but I do want to maintain flexibility in case, say in a lineup, I don't have Derrick Henry or I don't have XYZ that goes off. I want to be able to get off Kamara if I need to.
Yeah, and I agree with you. We've had situations like this in the past. You see a 37% on running back. Everyone's immediate reaction is, oh, I got to pivot. I got to find something else like that. Maybe it should be 50%. right? Maybe it should be more. I've talked about this plenty of times where, we just don't get that for whatever reason. We normally don't, unless, like you said, there's that slam dunk lock player, maybe going back to 2019 when you had a 3K flat running back. Now they've changed that. But if you had that, that would be a scenario where we would see guys 60% own, but 7.4K for Kamara and how much he's used in the, pass game, rush game, everything that they can use when Breeze is at the helm, which he is this week. Mind you joked before the show. Ian Rappaport said Breeze looks good. Anything Ian Rappaport has said this season has not been good. So I'm kind of worried about that a little bit, but we can't let that, skew it. He would tell us it's a sample size of only 2 or 3. And the data guys would say, okay, maybe we can go against that. So we'll have to see. I want to talk about a couple others here though, quick, because, people are right on Henry. The thing for me about Henry, especially in MME guys, is I can't go without. I'm not saying you're getting way overweight on him, whatever, but it's definitely a slate breaking spot. It is what it is. You could say it could fail. Absolutely. Anything could fail that we talk about here. Lots of plays can go down. Injuries can happen. There's so many things that can go on, but you're not building your lineups with that in mind, right? Especially if you're building a lot of lineups like we're talking about here. So I've got to be around field on Henry just because I think the matchup if we'll talk about another guy, he's not up here in the chalk area anymore, but Montgomery, right, was just hated on for weeks and then rattles off 3 in a row. Why? He played 32, 31, and 30th worst teams against the running back. He played the 3 nut matchups of the year back to back to back. So it makes him look killer. If you got those sports cards of Montgomery, get them sold because the time is now to sell high. But I would say that if you're looking through here, you've got Henry in that matchup. We know what they like to do. It's been a narrative, but it's been true, right? In December, in Cole, everything to do with it has been good. So I like Henry. The chat really wants to know, this is the big one, I think, and this is the decision point, is Leonard Fournette, because he is close to that value, 4K straight. He's at 4.5K. The matchup's Atlanta. There is no Ronald Jones, but it is still Fournette, and he was ceding snaps to guys like LaShawn McCoy last week. So what's your thoughts here on Leonard Fournette at 4.5K down at the bottom?
That's probably the biggest thing to me, and we'll get to kind of maybe a bombshell here that I did not expect this morning. But the Fournette thing to me is kind of bizarre. Like, I get if you just look at in a total vacuum, okay, Rojo out, they said Fournette's gonna step in and fill that role. But if you take a step back and think about like this situation for Leonard Fournette, this is a guy who was a healthy inactive last week. They chose when they didn't have to like bench. They could just like let him cede some snaps and still be active. They didn't even want him active on game day. And it's also because he's been so bad for them.
Oh yeah.
So he's been horrible. The team basically gave up on him. Now they are forced into using him because they don't really want to use LaShawn McCoy and Keyshawn Vaughn as like early down grinders. But I think it's very conceivable that he just steps into, maybe a 10 to 12 carry role and doesn't even get the pass down role. They were using LaShawn McCoy in the pass down role last week, even over Rojo. So like the Rojo role isn't even something that we've really valued that much this year. Like I know last week without Fournette, it bumped him up a little bit, but this isn't even a role. And this matchup isn't even that good. The Falcons actually have a pretty strong run defense. They'll cede some passing work to running backs, but it's not that we don't even know that Fournette's going to play the passing role. So, is it possible that he ends up getting a ton of volume and is a strong play? It's certainly possible, but I don't think it's as possible as the ownership is looking. So
yeah,
that's like, just a guy I want to move away from.
Yeah, it feels like kind of like when Adrian Peterson's down here. It's like, yeah, he's got a great matchup. He's got a great spot, but you like saw on Thanksgiving Day, Adrian Peterson can score 2 touchdowns and maybe not hit the optimal because just sort of how it pops out. I did, tease it a little bit on the Tourney Take spot. I just said the thing about it is though, and we'll get to quarterback, we'll get to some more news in 1 second, some big news that just popped up for the slate. If you're using Fournette in cash, I get it. I would actually still prefer it probably on FanDuel because I think Leonard Fournette's path, and on FanDuel we're looking for touchdowns because you don't get the bonuses or anything like that. And it's not like Fournette's going to do a bunch of that anyway. Typically, he'd have to bust a large one off, and even then, is he fast enough to get there? We've got some pretty fast cornerbacks and whatnot out there in the league that can get after it. So I think that there's a possibility. But I think that, if you look at it from that perspective, it's like they would have to basically have Tom Brady throw it to the end zone for a guy like Mike Evans or your boy Godwin and just have someone hang off them because they're so big. You just have to take the pass interference and let them get at the 1 yard line and hope your defense can stuff it. But that's where Fournette would get opportunity and chances. So I'm not high on him in large field stuff. I do like him. We'll see if I even get him in DraftKings on cash now that we've got the news. So we'll get to it. Some big news just dropped. A lot of inactives for Miami Dolphins. We got Mike Gesicki, Devontae Parker, and Jakeem Grant all out today. So Lynn Bowden Jr., this guy, most people didn't even know who he was last week. He popped, had a great game last week. He's back into the mix. So we'll get to that at wide receiver. I definitely think that's an opportunity. I would rather go to something like that maybe than a Fournette and be able to pump up. But we'll carry on with running back. We will get to that and comment on it further when we get to those positions. There's lots of time here, guys. We got about 50 minutes to go. So we're going to get through it all here. Any love for Cam Akers, Jonathan Taylor, Kenyon Drake? Those three we can sort of lump together.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely like those guys. I think those are guys though that I want to be really thoughtful about how I put them into lineups, solely because I think there are plenty of other running backs that have just as much upside, maybe just seem a little bit riskier. Like we're getting, and I talked to Jamino about this yesterday. I think we're getting these guys, Cam Akers and JT have basically popped in the last 1 to 2 weeks. And I think it's probably sustainable and the spots are good. And I get all of that, but there's plenty of fragility to these two guys. Like, I mean, I don't trust Sean McVay at all in any sort of usage of players. And JT, I mean, talk about Lucy with the football. JT's been that all year for worse than like Jets guys and stuff. We don't know. He could fumble. Nyheim Hines could get the hot hand. Jordan Wilkins could get the hot hand. A lot of things can happen for those guys for them to really struggle. So if I have like a pretty chalky build, I really think I want to get away from those guys down to kind of this next tier that we'll get into. But like in general, I do really like Akers and JT both.
Yeah, we just got some more news too. I'm with you on those calls. I like JT a little more than Akers. Akers, the thing that worries me is sort of the three-headed backfield there. And I know it can be just the same in Indy, but it's Indy against Houston. And I think if they stick with the hot hand approach, which they typically do, then we could see more out of Jonathan Taylor. I really do like that matchup. But yeah, even more news. So now again, Rappaport comes out. This isn't one where he can really get right or wrong. Hopefully he's saying that Zeke is going to be out. So he's not telling us anyone's going to be good or bad. He's just saying a guy's out. I hope we can trust that. So Zeke inactive. You go down here, you look, I was just pulling it up, 5.2K. It's, DraftKings done a better job of this lately, sort of looking for these spots to see. And now Mark Ingram is inactive, I see as well. So, there's a lot of guys coming out late here now. So J.K. Dobbins is in play. He always was probably against Jacksonville. I think that's one thing we'll talk about. We'll get to quarterback with Lamar in a minute. But Tony Pollard's certainly in play. I think this is one that anybody in the, entrenched into the DFS community has talked about this forever as far as the contract warriors go, and paying Zeke was absolutely ludicrous. $90 million when you had a guy like Pollard who was putting up numbers in any opportunity that he had. It didn't mean he was as good as him. It just meant that the ability was there and you didn't necessarily have to pay him. Could have paid Dak, could have paid a lot of other guys before they paid Zeke, I think. So a couple things there. Anybody else? So you've got Miles Sanders. I want to get this take. I definitely wanted to get to that one. You've got him tagged up. Heard a couple other sharper guys I follow beyond him this week. Wasn't really, on my radar, but talk to me about Miles Sanders at 6.9K here. I don't hate it.
Yeah. So I think especially when you compare Miles to say Akers and JT, like I was saying, you've seen like the Akers and JT pop right over the last couple of weeks. They've gotten a little bit more expanded role. Maybe the offense has improved, whatever. Well, Miles has been, a pretty big disappointment this year. But then last week we saw with Jalen Hurts kind of take the helm that Miles Sanders popped off for a big game in a really tough matchup. And so we see this trend, and he took almost the majority of the work, kind of similar to those other guys. It was a big step both in volume and performance for Miles Sanders last week. Was it a one game splash and he turns back into a pumpkin? It's certainly possible, but that's the same thing for Cam Akers and JT and a lot of other guys, honestly. So I think this is just a situation where maybe, we talk about like running quarterbacks really actually helping these running backs, because of the threat to run. The defense can't collapse on Miles like they could with Wentz in there. That I think this could be a potential like taking off point for Miles Sanders with Jalen Hurts getting in there. The matchup is fine. We know he's a dynamic player who can catch passes. So I think he's just kind of falling through the cracks, and he's at least as good of a play, if not better, than those other running backs right around him. So it's just kind of I think they're all like almost the same, honestly. They're all like pretty much the same. And Miles has just as much upside at half the ownership, a third of the ownership, maybe less.
Yeah, it's way less ownership, and I do love that call because you think about it further, it says what you just said, and we'll get to a guy in J.K. Dobbins in a second. It's just these running quarterbacks make these other guys better. Typically what happens with the running quarterbacks, and we see it plenty of times, especially in a spot, I kind of like this one even more with Hurts, is that he's going to scramble more, right? It's his first game on the road starting. It's, rookie quarterback. He's been good. We've seen great things out of him in the past, college, etc. But now we get a spot where when he's scrambling, he's just looking for that check down at the last second, why we'll talk about Hurts on this slate today is he also can find a guy downfield. So there's a lot of opportunity in these spots, and it does help the running backs. We've seen it with Lamar, Ingram last year. Speaking of Mark Ingram, we mentioned he's out. Antonio Gibson inactive as expected. That one's fine. But your boy Salvin Ahmed, I know you've talked about him in the past. He's back in the mix now. He's active today, so he's going to play. But J.K. Dobbins and Pollard. Let's lump these three together. Actually, Pollard, Dobbins, and Kenyon Drake. They're all right here in this little range here. I've got up Pollard at the bottom, Kenyon Drake here. Kenyon Drake's got more of the ownership, but obviously, Pollard's showing 0.6. That's going to update huge once we get this news out there with the Zeke stuff being official. So lump those three together and give me your takes.
Oh, that's tough. So I think Drake would be last for me solely because I do think that matchup is just really brutal. And I kind of think Cliff is smart enough. I hope Cliff is smart enough to kind of see the weakness of the Eagles being in the secondary with how banged up they are and how they kind of suck, even if they're not banged up, and look to exploit that a little bit. And Drake has gotten there with volume type stuff, but he hasn't really been super explosive anyway. Tony Pollard, I'm definitely, everything that you said, I'm just high on the talent and it's not the same situation, but workhorse running backs and the Cowboys on the Cowboys have been very, very advantageous. The issue that it's actually been still like fantasy relevant this year. The problem is it's been almost a 50-50 split between Zeke and Pollard, like 60-40, maybe 70-30. So I think people maybe have kind of forgotten about that a little bit. When Zeke was playing 90+% of the snaps, he was just a lock every week. And if Pollard would do the same, he kind of was too. So I'm interested in that. Their offensive line issues are very real. And the matchup is not particularly great for Pollard, but I think just from a volume perspective, you kind of have to love him. He's maybe my favorite kind of punt guy, but I think I want to throw all the Ravens running backs in together so I was interested in this before this news. So now I'm really, really interested in both J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards. I mean, if you want to talk about a matchup, you talked about Derrick Henry getting these dream matchups and like Montgomery crushing in these matchups. I mean, the Jaguars is arguably right there with the Lions as the best matchup in the league, but this is like the best running offense in the league with Lamar and these running backs. Ingram being out, I'm not sure really matters that much. So I'm a little concerned it naturally inflates. Ingram played like one snap last week, one or two snaps.
He wasn't playing much anyway. Exactly.
Yeah.
We've seen this. They have Justice Hill too, remember, as another guy.
So I one positive is I do think it shows, that extra hint of kind of confidence in Dobbins and Dobbins being the lead and Gus being the next guy with Justice sprinkled in. The only concern is does it inflate ownership? I think we have so much news now and so many different guys that are playable that I'm not sure that it does. But I do think it's just, it was kind of a smash spot for Dobbins to really break out. And maybe even Gus, let's say they get Dobbins runs for 102 and gets him way ahead. And then Gus is just eaten in the fourth quarter against, this defense that we just saw Derrick Henry run for almost 300 yards against. So I really like both the Ravens guys, but I'm kind of, I think I want to monitor the ownership of all these guys in this tier. Somebody's probably going to pop up, right? One of them's going to pop up as a lot higher owned. And I kind of think there's so many good plays. We want to steer towards the lower owned ones.
Yeah, I think all the Ravens could end up getting there. The thing is, it's Jacksonville, luckily for them, because if you recall too, Baltimore has no leash to play with. They have to win every game. So the bottom line is it's the only thing that worries me a little bit about a guy like Dobbins. Again, hopefully they're up and hopefully they do their thing. So everyone who follows me knows that's my squad. So hopefully they do their thing. But if they don't, I think here's the thing: if they crush, if you expect that, and that's what hopefully you do expect, and I expect, then I do like Dobbins because I like them to let the rookie run free. Let's go. Let's see what we got out of him, especially if they get up 2 or 3 touchdowns. It's go time for him. But do they in the beginning say we need Gus? Gus has been our guy on the goal line to slam this thing in the bus. Why don't we put him through and just plow through and get him in there a couple times and he starts the game with a couple touchdowns? And that's what leads to maybe J.K. J.K. Dobbins getting there late. J.K. Dobbins, electric with the ball in hand. Certainly like him. I just don't know if it's a slam dunk or anything like that. In large fields, definitely plugging him in as we're talking about here. So I like that. I'm with you on the Drake matchup. I do like Drake a little bit more than you, only because the situation, when you got a guy again back to use the Hurts and Sanders thing. Now we're talking about Kyler Murray and Drake. It's, we're upgrading a little. I don't think at running back, I like Miles Sanders quite a bit more than Drake, but that price is involved. That's $1,400 that we're talking about there. But I do like the quarterback at the helm. I like the spot. The Philly D is pretty worked over. So I think there's going to be opportunities, not to mention too, Kyler has an arm. This is sort of goes back to the Leonard Fournette situation. Kyler's got the arm to get it downfield, and guys like Kirk and whatnot maybe can't make those catches, but they get a little PI action. The next thing you know, Drake's there slamming it in. Or he's been pretty good around the goal line, even on end arounds and things like that. So I think that's a good spot. The Pollard one is the one that worries me the most, and I think the chat shows like everyone's happy to just go plug him in. I'm with you, high on talent. What I'm worried a little bit more about, though, here is a couple things. The offensive line has been absolutely atrocious. Andy Dalton is going to be looking to throw to pass catchers. He's got Gallup, he's got Cooper, he's got Lamb, he's got Schultz, all these guys that he loves. And then also their D is horrible. So if San Francisco is able to do their thing and get up, like I just don't know. Obviously, Pollard would still be used in the pass game. I'm not concerned, but he's never been like a 10 targets guy. This would be a chance to open it up and see what happens here. And 5.2K, he's not completely free as we would expect, right? DraftKings was prepared for this. So just of note, it worries me a little bit more there. We'll stop at that. Anybody else you wanted to mention at running back? I know there was the San Francisco situation earlier in the week, but Mostert's good to go. So, Wilson's not on top anymore here, anything like that. Anybody else at running back before we move to quarterback?
A couple quick ones that are maybe less viable now. But I did actually think David Johnson was reasonable for tournaments, maybe not as much now because some of these other guys really pop up. But Duke Johnson is out, and so is CJ Prosise. And we saw earlier in the year that David Johnson was playing basically every snap, which is like something we don't really get anymore. And I know he may be dusty and they may not be able to run the ball very well, but I think that game has a lot of kind of shootout potential, and he's attached to Deshaun Watson. So same thing, just being out there every snap is nice. The Patriots situation, Damian Harris is out. I do think with these Dolphins injuries, I think it's pretty conceivable that the Dolphins really, really struggle on offense here, which would set it makes me sick, but would set up somebody like a Sony Michel for quite a bit of volume. And we saw Damian Harris, Damian Harris was pretty fantasy viable in this offense, getting those kind of touches. And then there was one other that I kind of mentioned Latavius Murray, that I would just keep that in the back of your mind as we go to the afternoon slates, that, depending on how the first games go, or if you're kind of crazy like me and you're interested in leveraging something like that Latavius would be a pretty sick leverage play. And we saw him pop earlier this year for a couple touchdowns in one of the Kamara chalk spots. So.
Yeah, and if you're going to the afternoon, you're way behind. You've got Kamara. It's up to you. You can try and sneak into the cash now, but if you got an opportunity and a few spots you can move around, that would be definitely one that you could leverage off of, no problem. A couple more things. James White active to the Patriots side of things. Stafford is going to play through this thing. They expected it. He's been the Iron Man, so that's as expected. Your boy Jimmy Graham. So when we get to our guy Cole Kmet later, Jimmy Graham is active, going to play Alexander Madison, and we'll keep monitoring the news. If you guys can, check it out there. Producer Devin's dropping everything in the chat. The one thing I haven't seen him drop for a minute is if you guys do want to get access to ownership projections here, Lineup HQ, the ability to use this to optimize your lineups and get them built out, he'll chuck it into the chat. You guys can go and sign up. Obviously, these shows are free every Sunday. We appreciate all the support, but we'll keep it rolling here, man. We're going to move into quarterback and move a little quicker, maybe tie in some stacks with it so we can get to some more questions at the end. But what are you doing here at quarterback? Because on a week like this, 11 games, it always does typically gets, spaced out a little bit. But it's still pretty clear Lamar at the top. People are using him naked mostly. And then in cash, I think he's very popular. It all makes sense because the price this time last year, we were paying $8,500 for this spot, right? Now this year, it's been a little bit more down than up, right? Teams caught on to him a little bit early on, but late he's been doing his thing. And all jokes aside from the last game, we'll leave that for another day. He still came back and he got the W. So let's talk about Lamar Jackson and then other guys up here at the top: Murray, Hurts, Mahomes, Goff, all these guys.
Yeah, I certainly like Lamar. I think Lamar is very interesting because in theory he does have the ceiling, right? But I just struggle with paying up for Lamar when this matchup doesn't necessarily lend itself to kind of Lamar being pushed. And this year, not that they obviously leaned on the ground game last year, but this year with kind of their struggles, really struggles connecting in the passing game, they've leaned on, and that's good for Lamar because he runs too, obviously, but they've really leaned on this ground game. And I think having a guy like Dobbins and even Gus is a pretty good runner. Having a guy like Dobbins there allows them to really lean on it a little bit more in a soft matchup. So I'm actually a little lower on Lamar for tournaments than maybe the field is. But there's a lot of I agree with you. I think it's going to be pretty spread out. I do think a guy like Jalen Hurts, we have him at 10%. I think a guy like Jalen Hurts, as you rise up the stakes or get into smaller field tournaments, I think he gets a lot more popular because he provides you with the savings to be able to get some guys. And obviously the rushing, the Konami code aspect is really nice, and the matchup is fine. So Hurts is just another guy that I like too. But I'm kind of avoiding just based on, I think he rises up. The guy that I have tagged that is a little off the board is Mitch Trubisky.
Yeah.
I think he's if you want to save at quarterback, I think he's my go-to guy. I think people forget about how good he is fantasy wise. Good is a relative term, but for the price he's always at, he's pretty good fantasy wise. He does provide you with rushing upside. And one thing that I really like that people don't talk about in tournaments enough is kind of the clarity of stacking options with a quarterback. When you have, it's like the Colts have been not that you want to play Phillip Rivers, but the Colts are the example of how the hell do I stack up the Colts? They play 3 tight ends and 3 running backs and like 6 wide receivers. So like, even if I want to play Phillip Rivers, it's really hard because there's no clear guys to stack them with. The Bears are the opposite. Allen Robinson is a total alpha, one of the biggest alphas in the NFL. And now we're starting to see Cole Kmet emerge, which is a really nice addition to a stack when you can get that $3,000 tight end, that helps you with savings and clearly correlates. So I think Trubisky makes a lot of sense, and he's kind of my go-to punt quarterback.
Yeah, I really like that. I actually like it more than Hurts personally. I think I know everything you said is true. Like Hurts is actually going to be even higher on the higher stakes that we get. Because the fact that you just have a floor ceiling opportunity there. Like I said, a couple things that worry me. One, rookie quarterback on the road, first start, going up against Arizona. I don't know how that's going to play out. Obviously the pace is there and he could continue on. I don't hate the play. I just, like I said, it's tough. You're already starting off how a lot of other people are starting off. So, I just try some other things out. There's other guys there. You could play some Drew Brees stacks if you feel comfortable. And I guess 2 things I would say, one with the Trubisky, one with Drew Brees, just using these guys in this range. You mentioned one. So the Trubisky side of things is like Kirk Cousins. He's got Jefferson and Thielen. And if you're leveraging a Cook game, the target tree is that. So why wouldn't you play that? They're like 80% of the passing game. So that's why you see Kirk Cousins. People are like, how can people get on Kirk Cousins? Well, we knew we'd be able to stack them up that way. And it makes sense from that perspective. Yep. The other thing is when it's chalk coincides, and I'll use it for both these guys. For Breeze, you've got Kamara, who we know is super high owned, but now you've got Breeze, who's not owned at all. So you could basically use that to tie it together. Kamara is like, we're going to get to this at tight end, but everyone last week was Gesicki and Kelsey. How the heck does this happen? This guy's at his double tight end is terrible, but realistically, Kelsey is not a tight end. It's just a position title. And because when we play daily fantasy, that's a 1Z position that they just get sucked into this as if if they're anywhere not in that role, you can't use them outside of that. If you're not in that position, you can't use them outside of that, but you can. That's why there's a flex spot, and that's why it allows tight end. It's the same thing here. Kamara has to be used in running back, and is not like he's a secret. He's going to be used almost 40% in that slot, but that's why we thought about should he be more, because it's like when a wide receiver is throwing passes or something like that, you've got all these dual threat, triple threat abilities, then you've got a spot where you can get add a little bit more to the projection or eke them out just a little bit more. And I do like that, using a guy like Breeze for that. And then Trubisky, I love, because like you said, we're going to get to Kmet when we move over to tight end here shortly. I love Allen Robinson. I think Kmet is a good play, chalk or not. And so now how do you take that a step further and level it up? You add their quarterback to it, and that's how it ends up happening. A lot of people are just looking for Kmet as catch me 5 passes, do anything for me as a one-off at tight end in cash. But how can you make that work in tournaments? And speaking of Trubisky and being a good fantasy option, I think he's won people I think it's up to like 4 or 5 milli makers now that have been won by Mitch Trubisky stacks in this spot. So, I mean, I'm fine with that. I'm sort of with you on Lamar at the top. The thing for cash, I get it. For large field, I'm not as excited. I don't really love the stacks or anything. He passes the ball 10 to 20 times a game. Here with Ingram out, they're just going to smash. I think just keep going. I'll talk about Kyler Murray in a second. I actually really like him. But just last thing on Lamar, The thing about him for something like cash though, and what keeps me in play for me is like 50 yards on the ground, couple touchdowns, whether he runs one, throws one, whatever it is, that's literally his floor. So you know what you're getting out of the gate. And again, he's not costing 8,500 like he did in the past. He's 7,500. So I'm with that. Kyler Murray, though, we sort of, breezed over him right quick, but Kyler Murray, so Philly D is not good. Darius Slay is not good. Slay is out on top of already not being good or has not been good. You could say he's good, but he has not been good this season. People have been eating him up. And now you've got Hopkins, running free out there. We talked about Drake. You've got Kirk. There's Dan Arnold, who he likes to go to. You can really stack up Murray as well in large field stuff and just mix and match these pairings around him. And also Murray just runs so much and does his own thing that and he's been so good at it that you almost don't need to stack him up with more than one guy. Right? You can just go Murray and pick one. So what's your thoughts here on, let's tie in Kyler Murray as well, with all that being said, with a guy like Patrick Mahomes, who can do what he needs to do in 3 quarters and break the slate himself. So what about those two guys, just these powerhouses that put up the points?
Yeah, I really like both of them. I don't know about you. I've had a hard time getting to them, and maybe that's changing now. Once we get done here with a lot of the potential value that might have opened up here. We did have some decent wide receiver value that I think was more playable than people think. But I mean, Kyler Nuke stack is definitely one of the top on the board for me. I think the matchup just lends itself to a lot of positives for Kyler. I don't think that they'll be able to run very well. I think that we saw him start to run a little bit more again last week, which is a huge perk. And then, when in general, like when you just take a step back and think about Nuke is in an awesome spot, Kirk is in an awesome spot, Drake is not in an awesome spot. Well, you should probably like that quarterback. And when that quarterback is, the best running quarterback in the league, or the second best running quarterback in the league, I mean, the upside is immense. And there are also cheap bringbacks on the Saints. You can do the Miles Sanders thing, or both of the tight ends are super cheap for the Eagles. Jalen Reagor is going to be 1% now, given all the value. So there's interesting ways to go about that game. I really like Kyler. Mahomes was a guy I couldn't afford. Like I couldn't figure out a way to even make it work all week with Mahomes. But now I'm starting to rethink that a little bit. The really interesting thing about Mahomes, and this has been the case, guys like Mahomes and Derrick Henry, when they get priced up a ton, again, as you rise up stakes or get into smaller field contests, people are really, really price sensitive and like point per dollar projection sensitive. And Mahomes never, at 8K, he just can't possibly project better than Hurts, Lamar, Kyler, go on down the list, right? So it does make it interesting for me that if you're going to get the best quarterback in the NFL in probably the best game of the week, I know the matchup isn't perfect, but Mahomes has become maybe a little bit more of, not necessarily a priority, like I'm going to jam him in, but I want to see how I can make Chief stacks using Mahomes work this week. So those two guys have kind of risen up my board a little bit, just as we've been on the show, as we've seen like some value open up that makes it a little easier to access those guys.
Yeah, one thing I love about Mahomes stacks, you make a good point there, and it's what I look for pretty much every DFS sport that I play. But if it's hard for me to find a way to make it work, it means it's extremely hard for everybody to find a way to make it work. And then what that means is it's just not going to be owned enough based on what it is. Because if everyone's trying to make it happen and then just gives up and goes, okay, if I can't do that, then let me just drop down and do Kyler or something. Could that get there? Absolutely. But it just means everybody's leaving it behind. So I certainly do like going with the Mahomes stuff there, especially now we've got even more value and less people likely to flip onto it. We're going to get to wide receiver and tight end here shortly. But I think that's sort of the other thing is Kelsey, these one-off spots, anytime you can get these higher priced tight ends in these good spots or good matchups, good games, whatever it might be, where no one's really going to be on them, that's when you want to take advantage of them. And we've seen it with Waller. We've seen it with a couple, Kelsey himself last week, all of this stuff. So we'll refresh this just to see if there's any ownership updates here yet. Traquan Smith, just talking about my Breeze stuff earlier, someone asked about him. We're going to get to wide receiver in a second. I think he's a fine play, and I think it's one where doesn't really have to do a lot, right? Because he's 3,200. So we'll get over there afterwards. We'll see what happens in between. I guess a couple others here. So Jared Goff, to me, with the Akers conversation, just this is a good way to go about it. I mentioned this one. Kirkwood brought it up on the Turn Take spot. I'd love to take is we've been targeting the Jets all season in the secondary. but this week is because Akers has had a couple good games and they're starting to, feed him. Now you've got no one thinking about this, but there's Cup, there's Woods, there's Goff. These are the guys, again, another tight target tree there. Yes, maybe he'll sprinkle in the odd tight end or a guy like Van Jefferson or something that you'll see happen. But at the end of the day, it is pretty much Cup, Woods, and Goff. That's where you can stack it up and see what you want to do. So I like that side of that game. I've heard some people on Watson. You can speak to some of these guys if you think. And then the other one is Tom Brady. I really like Brady because of the Fournette situation. It's just like I said, there's guys you can use. Again, it's the hardest one to maybe stack up. So you have to have that's why we're in lineup HQ. That's why we're doing MME stuff here and going through it. But you do have to mix and match. But to me, it's still pretty simple. Evans, Godwin, Brown, Gronk. There's the 4. If it ends up being a Brait day or something like that, or a Scotty Miller big one, so be it. You want to mix those into your pool and you got 150, by all means, go ahead. But I'm going to try and hit the guys that I think have the floor and the ceiling and then level it up from there. So, and anybody else with those guys that you want to talk about, and then anybody else here at this position you want to talk about?
Nothing super specific about those guys, but I think all those points kind of it just makes it super clear to me about how many good plays there are and how many good stacks there are. Like if I'm saying even I like Tom Brady, I'm the biggest Tom Brady hater ever. He ruined my boy Chris Godwin, but I like Tom Brady this week, and he's the 8th, 10th best quarterback play. So just from a projection sense, he's an extremely viable tournament quarterback. Same thing. The Goff thing is really funny because I don't think anybody's going to play. I think we might even be high on Goff, and like you said, there might not be a better floor spot. I guess maybe the Saints. There might not be a better floor spot for an offense than the Rams. I mean, they're playing the lowly Jets. Everybody scores. The only thing you're worried about is will the Jets push them, and or does that matter? But the Rams are actually another reason why I want to keep flexibility as much as I can, for the afternoon, because kind of the same thing. Okay, early games don't go according to plan. Let's say I don't play J.K. Dobbins and he goes for 40, right? Well, now maybe I don't want to stack. I don't want to play Kamara so I can get to Latavius, and I don't want to play Akers so you can flip it. Now I get the Rams passing game, and then I leverage off of say Kamara, and sure, my probability of winning is much, much lower, but I at least now gave myself a shot at winning. So I think they're an interesting kind of really good strong play that's also a really good leverage play, and those are pretty elite tournament options. Watson, same thing. I mean, Watson every week is just a really strong option. I think we might be a little low on him ownership too. People just love him, right? And he's below 7,000. His stacking options are cheap, even if they're kind of tough to plug in now. But I just think there's so many that. We just talked about 10 to 15 quarterbacks, and they're all really good plays. So that's kind of why, getting away from the Lamars and Hurts of the world, you can still make really, really good teams at much lower ownership.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. I'm much lower for those that want more clarity. I'm way lower on Lamar and Hurts. I understand using them in cash. I understand just putting them naked and getting that value out of them, but that's not where I want to go in my tournament stacks or even in my tournament builds. I'm looking at guys like Kyler, like Mahomes, Goff, and just back to Goff and Tom Brady for a second I don't think the Jets can push anyone, but I think Goff can be bad enough at times where he has to bounce back from it, and that's where you get all those passing opportunities. And if the Jets do get in there, then it turns into a bit of a game. Brady, the same thing. You've got Matt Ryan, no Julio. That one worries me a little bit more, but at least if he does show up with Ridley, Gage, that type of show, then we could be able to see a back and forth there. And the last guy I want to talk about, and we'll move on, is Andy Dalton. I just think this is another spot. Again, now everyone's going to be on Pollard. I was already sort of liking Dalton, though. I like the stack options, right? You've got Gallup, who's super cheap. You've got Lamb, who's pretty cheap. Cooper's cheap for Cooper, right? So you've got all these guys. Schultz, who he likes to go down to. And I think that's what I said. I just don't see them being way up in this game where it's going to be a big Pollard spot. So that kind of news makes it even better, I think, for my Andy Dalton stacks. So we'll move on. I'll go to a wide receiver. You can tie it in with anybody that you want there. We've got the chalk, Ayuk, Sanders, Tyreek Hill's getting a little love, but there's not much chalk at running back. Typically, you see at least 3 guys over 15% or more. It's not showing up that way yet. We may see Bowden Jr. pop up there in a second because the idea of obviously everybody being out for Miami, but we'll try and run these together pretty quick. We got about 20 minutes left, so don't want to go through, line by line or price tier by price tier, but just talk to me a little bit about your guys, and then I'll talk about some of my guys, and then we can tie it in with tight end to get out of here.
Yeah, I think this position got maybe even more interesting as we've sat here and talked, because I did think it was it was kind of a fun week because no one really did stand out. There was like, it's kind of similar to quarterback. There were so many plays that I thought were pretty darn close to each other at like every price tier. and now that's maybe even more true. Brandon Ayuk, I still think I think Emmanuel Sanders might pop even higher than Brandon Ayuk does in terms of ownership, just because of the savings that he provides you. But I agree with those guys being the highest owned. And the funny thing about Tyreek is that we're projecting him, reasonably owned, but like, man, he is one of the guys that never, like, it's kind of the Derrick Henry thing, right? The quote unquote sharps, don't want to play Derrick Henry for 9,500, a running back who doesn't catch passes. He just never gets chalky enough to where you're worried about it. Tyreek Hill ends up being kind of the same thing because he's this weird archetype player, right? Like he's clearly has ceiling through the roof, but he's this 5'8" wide receiver that has to score on 70-yard touchdowns. At almost 9,000, people want to play Devontae Adams and Michael Thomas and those guys at that price because I can just lock in, all those 8-yard catches. But that's not how Tyreek Hill plays. So
speed kills, man. Speed kills.
But people don't realize.
Exactly.
Like he touched the ball like 3 times last week and he scored like 25 fantasy points. I mean, he's truly absurd, but it's hard to project that guy, and everything is so based off projection. So I kind of think Tyreek Hill is just an awesome tournament play. We'll see how this value kind of, whether that catapults him up or not, but people just default to Kelsey on the Chiefs, right? So we have all this awesome Saints value, whether it's Kamara, Sanders. I love Traquan Smith. I think he's an amazing tournament play today. But you have all this Saints value in a great spot. And everybody, when you want to play a Chief, it's like, do I want to pay this 5'8" guy who has to catch an 80-yard touchdown to smash at 9,000, or do I lock in Travis Kelce, who gets at tight end, which sucks, who gets 30 fantasy points every week? So it's like, I just love kind of that methodology in tournaments. Not that I don't love Kelce, I would love to get both if I can. But exactly. but I just love the way that Tyreek Hill's ownership always stays in check. So he's a priority for me. And like I said, I love the Saints guys. And then I talked about Trubisky. So Allen Robinson clearly is a priority for me as well.
Yeah, I like all those plays. I'm with you on the Tyreek Hill thing. It's like I said, people just they want something different for that money, and they're just like, how can he get there all the time? But he does. It's like, so when you put that arm strength with Mahomes, with that speed, tied in with the fact that we talked about how hard it is to get a guy like Patrick Mahomes in your lineup while still fitting, some good value plays in there, and some guys that actually make sense, that have roles, that could have upside, et cetera, et cetera. It really does tie in together. The Ayuk thing is great. Like, this guy's basically Robinson. Allen Robinson's down here at 10%, who I love this week. But when you look at it too, Ayuk is $1,100 cheaper. And if you look at that target tree, man, they've just been going to him nonstop. So, the target chart, I should say, they've been going to him nonstop. And on the target tree, he's by far number one. No Debo. Like, this is just another smash spot. But again, how can you use him in tournaments? I look at it like I just said, and it kind of ties into where I was going and rounded out at quarterback. I'm using him in Andy Dalton stacks. You can use him as a secondary stack, especially now with Pollard. Mm-hmm. But I think that becomes popular. You're looking at the most popular wide receiver, even if he comes down as 2 or 3, because Sanders, Lynn Bowden, and Smith pop up, let's say, that's fine. He's still a top 4 owned wide receiver, we'll call it, give him some leeway here. And then you've got Pollard, who's going to fly up the board as well. So it's not really a sneaky secondary stack or something that you're putting together that's crazy. So I like using them instead in the Dalton stacks, Dalton, Lamb, Schultz, run it back with Ayuk, something like that. That for me is a way to get around that, because I think he's a great play. But when I have great chalk plays, I like to find ways to use them that will make it so it's not a chalk build, right? If that makes any sense. Yep. So definitely going with that route. I'm with you. You've got the red dot here down on Traquan. $1,000 is a lot of money, man. This is the same offense, the same situation. Sure, he's more boom or bust, but what are we looking for in tournaments? Am I looking for Sanders to get 660 and 1? Which would be nice for sure. I'd love that at 4.2K. Don't get me wrong. That's a great stat line, but I'm saying that it doesn't mean that's automatic. Let's say he comes up short and has 460 and 0. You flip some of those numbers. That's not so exciting anymore, even though it was on 7 targets. You're like, well, he had the targets. You can talk about that tomorrow when you didn't win the GPP. So that's sort of how I look at that situation. Yeah, Traquan might have a 0. We'll still be talking about that tomorrow when we didn't win the GPP, but at the same time, he could catch one bomb for 80 and there it is, or catch it from 40 and take it to the house. I mean, there's more opportunity for me with a guy like that. I think some other guys people like for sure. T.Y. Hilton, worry a little bit about chasing here. I've been on it since the start. I'm more of a sell high. use T.Y. Hilton in cash. I think his ownership could get up a little bit more, but I think I'm going to try that. I'm going to refresh just for some ownership stuff right now too, guys, while we go through it. Any love, or you want to talk about the Hilton take for a second there, Eric?
Yeah. I feel the same. Hilton is like a kind of like we talked about with some of the running backs, where it looks like a trend, right? They've had a couple good games in a row. They're starting to get more volume. Maybe like you were on this. It's something that you expected. But like there's so much more variance in all these NFL games and these individual players and the volume that happens to them. I just don't want to be at when the field is on it, right? So like the Miles Sanders thing, the field is not on a potential Miles Sanders like turnaround, right? But the field is on that T.Y. Hilton is back, right? So that's when I want to be like, well, I have no idea if he's back. No one does. But like everybody's acting as if they know that he is back, and so they know that Jonathan Taylor is now the lead dog. They know that Ty is back to being Alpha Ty. When they think that they know those things, I just kind of want to go the other way. So Ty's, I probably won't. I haven't built a cash team yet, not with the latest news, but I think he's in play for cash. But I'm off it for tournaments.
Yeah, there's a lot of scrambling going on as we speak. So everyone, just so you guys know, it's been updated. So here we go with that. Someone said in the chat too, think about Hilton. Just last thought is he crushes the Texans. Interestingly enough, he's crushed the Texans mostly on the road and they're at home. But hey, who knows? Like you said, that's just a narrative thing, and it's such a small sample over X amount of seasons that even though they play him twice a year, the idea is that it's like it can definitely change in a 1-game sample. So who cares? But look at this. Lynn Bowden Jr., 9%. I flipped over to running back. We'll go back real quick for 2 seconds. Tony Pollard, man, all the way up to 31%. See, I get it. This is the thing. Everyone loves the talent. If it breaks me, so be it. I'll probably use him some, but man, this is a tough one for me to swallow. I just worry about this one. It's like this Tony Pollard thing reminds me, and J.K. Dobbins, by the way, shot to like 13%, but this Tony Pollard thing reminds me of when a quarterback is out last second, and I'll use a couple years ago. It was like Brock Osweiler is now the starting quarterback, and everyone's like, "Oh man!" And they all scramble off. And defense doesn't matter, but they go to the defense and they pick the defense against that quarterback because of they're playing a bad quarterback. But they forget that the coach has to flip his thing too and flip his script. And the idea is now that quarterback just passes the ball, hands the ball off a bunch of times. There's no sack opportunities. There's no INT opportunities. There's nothing that happens there. And this reminds me of this too. What if he doesn't get a bunch of, he's going to be the running back, but if they get down in this game, it could just be a lot of Dalton throwing to Pollard, Schultz, Lamb, Cooper, etc. So worries me a little bit. I'll be under the field for sure. I think the good news is someone made sense is I think if you go back to, someone just brought this up. Great point. Look at this. Now Fournette drops way down. People just don't have faith in the guy. But like I said, the offense is good. The spot is good. Atlanta is without Julio. They don't really have anyone there. I think Tampa could just smash them. I like some Fournette Buccaneers correlation secondary stacks. And I don't normally, I'm not like you have to have running back and D. I think getting away from that this year has especially been better because it's one that everyone thinks you have to get that correlation in your lineup to round it out, and you don't. But I do think that this would be a spot that would absolutely make sense. So what else do we got here, man? I guess, Gallup, we just got so many guys to talk about. If you guys want to throw some questions in about wide receiver, do that. I do want to talk about tight end. I think it's big, and it's a onesie position. It's a lot. It can change your lineup in a heartbeat. So I'm going to move it over here just due to the spirit of time. Lots of news today, guys. We can only get through so much in an hour. Stay tuned after us. There's going to be another show talking about more of the stuff as they scramble through it. But we wanted to kind of give you our tournament takes on how we can utilize this and use this stuff to your advantage. Talk about tight end then, Eric, because Kelsey, being the highest owned coming off of last week's excellent performance, is still only 17.9%. We talked about how it's hard to get Mahomes in your lineup. So maybe he comes in as sort of a one-off there. And then Kmet, 3K. 13.8%. Jimmy Graham is active, but just has looked really good. People did miss the boat at the 0.4 and 1.2% ownership. You could have got the last 2 weeks when he was doing these things, but talk to me about this position as a whole and just the chalk in general.
Yeah, I actually think it's a really interesting. It typically isn't a very interesting position, but I actually think it is pretty interesting this week. Obviously, Kelsey at the top is like, if you can get him, you can't really say anything negative about Kelsey. But even with all the value, there are limitations to your lineup with Travis Kelsey. And if you're playing Travis Kelsey, it's really hard to fit Tyreek Hill. Like if you want to stack the Chiefs, or it's really hard to get Alvin Kamara or Derrick Henry or DeAndre Hopkins. It becomes really tough when you play Travis Kelce to fit some of these other studs that you might make priorities. So that's, always something to consider, but I'm not going to say a single negative thing about the tight end that might lead the NFL in receiving this year. In a probable shootout game. The only thing I will say is it's not a very good, I'm not sure matchups matter for Travis Kelce. It's not a very good matchup for Travis Kelce. And the Saints are also, the only thing that scares me about that game is the Saints, even with Drew Brees, are not the most aggressive team. I think people look at them as the Saints and in the dome and all that, but the Saints have, really been kind of a run heavy team and short passing team. So it's possible that a little bit of upside gets limited for a guy like Kelce this week, who requires, he's amazing, but he still needs his 7-8 catches to really hit a ceiling. So I'm going to use Kelce where it makes sense, but I don't think we should just assume 30 points every single week. And then with Kmet, I think after Kelce, really, I think it's about how you're building your lineups. And it's typically the case with tight end, but correlating your tight end, I think, especially on a week like this, where there are quite a few decent high upside plays, is one of the most important things that you can do. Just plugging in Cole Kmet and just because he's cheap, if you're not playing Trubisky or Cousins, or you're just using that savings, you're not playing Dalvin or Thielen or something as a secondary correlation with Kmet, I think is pretty foolish in tournaments, because you're typically hitting a ceiling game from your tight end when that offense explodes. You don't get a lot of, even Waller had that big game, right? But the Raiders scored 40 or whatever. Kelce popped. The Chiefs score 1 million points every week, and that's why Kelce is having a big game. So you want to be targeting the tight end on the team or in the game that really explodes. So if you're playing the Trubisky like I am, and I think you are, Kmet makes a lot of sense. But I also really like Irv Smith Jr. on the other side of that game. I think if you're stacking that game, playing Irv at super low ownership as one of your bringbacks or as your bringback from the Vikings, Rudolph is out. People have just forgotten. It was not that long ago that with Kyle Rudolph out, Irv Smith was the super chalk, right? At not much cheaper than this. But now, and last week he was really good without Rudolph. He scored their only touchdown. So I think Irv Smith actually has quite a bit of upside here in this spot. Makes a lot of sense as a bring back or just a contrarian pivot at tight end.
Yeah, I'll follow up with my thoughts. I'm with you on almost all of that. I think that's all good calls. I love the thought of the tight end with the quarterback or the opposing quarterback has certainly been a thing, because those correlate with themselves. We talk about this all the time. You can use it in showdown and super flex. Why you want two quarterbacks together is because if one has a good game, the other typically has a good game, or at least has the opportunity to. So That all makes sense. Just back on some of the wide receiver stuff quick, because we'll hit questions in between, just everything in general. But JD McKissick, I don't love him as much with Dwayne Haskins at the helm, right? This was an Alex Smith thing. He was checking down to him a bunch. I like Terry McLaurin. So when someone asked about him, we're trying to jam as much as we can into this Sunday scramble that we've got here in front of us. I do think Bourne is a good GPP leverage play off of Ayuk. I also think he's a fine play if you want to put them together and get them mixed up, because they're both so, Ayuk isn't cheap, but he's cheap for what he does, and Bourne is cheap. So I think there's ways to use that. Pollard is going to flex quite a bit, I think. I'm a Godwin guy, and I know you'll love that. So I'm, Godwin versus Evans. I'm a Godwin guy. I think he's just better. And I think it just, Evans is the biggest dude out there. So of course he can get the touchdowns once they get up there into the red zone, but I like Godwin for 40-yard touchdowns and the ability. He's just as big, in the red zone to get his opportunities. It just depends on who Tom throws it to. Hard to take shots there, but I'll go Godwin in that spot. McLaurin for sure. They talk about Waller ate up the Saints, and now it's the same matchup for Kelce. Sure. Kelce doesn't, like you said at the top, though, it's not why you did it. Kelce's not, he's matchup independent. It doesn't matter for Kelce. He's either does or he doesn't. And it's Kelce here. So hard to get away from him. 8K with all these cheaper values now make him a little bit more affordable. And then Pranav, you just brought up a guy I love the support. You're always here every week with us. I do like Russell Gage. I'm considering Russell Gage in one of my main $1,500 builds, just because I think at $4,700, no Julio, I like him as a plug-in spot. It's hard to get to Ridley, who's had incredible games. Just going back to Ridley for a second, you can use him without Julio. He's been great, but again, it's expensive to get to, and there's a lot of other guys that I'd rather get to in those spots. But I think Gage is a great opportunity to save some money and drop down. Back to tight end, you mentioned the guys I like. Goddard stands out a little bit to me at 3,900. I like Irv Smith at 36. I'll use him in some of the stuff where I'm doing with Trubisky. You can do sort of a Cousins, Jefferson, Irv, run it back with Robinson. There's ways to go there. Try the double tight end. I will have some double tight end Smith Komet lineups because I do like both of them. And again, and they'll be in stacks. So it's not like I'm going off. This is if you get points out of this game. Those guys could go off and I could basically fit whoever I want at wide receiver and running back now and not have to play all of these other values and just hope that these guys are the ones. We saw it a little bit yesterday. It didn't get off there. It was a 2-game slate, obviously much more viable. It didn't quite get off, but you had Noah Fant and Dawson Knox. They both had pretty good games and could have been even better. Dawson Knox didn't finish out the best, but Fant had himself a huge game, and it was trending that way after just the first game. So I don't hate that. Guys, throw your questions into the chat. We got about 4 minutes left. This is perfect. We'll circle back to wide receiver, maybe Dalton Schultz. I mentioned him earlier. This has just been a guy Andy Dalton's attached to. So, I've looked at some of the stuff, Dalton, Schultz, Dalton to Dalton, if you want to play it that way, Dalton squared could be a thing. But then I do think you still need to go a step further because in order for Dalton to have a ceiling, it's going to involve Cooper, Lamb, or Gallup. So mix it up however you want. But I just think that's awesome that becomes sort of a natural leverage spot now that nobody was even on it, but nobody is going to move to it, even though everyone's moving to Pollard. So I really do like that one to round out the day. Anything else you want to talk about at tight end, or should we go back to wide receiver some?
I think we maybe should mention Jared Cook, that he becomes like, he's not going to be like low owned, but he is kind of the guy just because of the nuance of the slate, a little bit falling through the cracks on the Saints. And he certainly has a ton of opportunity without Michael Thomas. So I think he's interesting in and of himself, but just being a little bit more than Komet, and obviously, he's nowhere near the Kelsey tier. He kind of falls in this weird spot that doesn't become optimal. And people are playing Kamara, people are playing Emmanuel Sanders, a little bit of Traquan Smith. But I even think, like, if you really want to get crazy, and I think I'm going to do this on at least a team, is kind of like super stacking the Saints, if you will, and just like really loading up on that game. Like, because the thing about the Saints is that they are all cheap, and like to your double tight end, you can double tight end a team like that too with Cook and Kelsey. And multiple of the Saints. I actually think that's like a more than reasonable tournament build that people won't do, especially now. Like, well, I can just play Pollard. I don't need to play a third Saint when I can just play Pollard or Dobbins or whatever. And I think Cook is an interesting play in that, or just same thing. I talked about flexibility earlier. If you maintain some flexibility, things don't go perfect, and you have Kelsey in, you can maybe make a swap like Kelsey down to Cook, and now you can fit whoever, Nuke or DeAndre Hopkins or something like that.
I was just going to say, I like that to your point earlier with Kamara. Kamara is going to be the guy in the flex.
Yeah.
So if you've got, I don't know how you'd get but let's say you had something else in there in the afternoon games with that. Now, if Kamara is not going to work for you, maybe you can go to a Cook or a Kelsey and a Cook if you're using two positions there. So if you have Cook, Kamara, and one other guy, you can look to flip it to the double tight end and then a cheap wide receiver like Smith, right? You could end up with Smith, Cook, and Kelsey instead of Kamara, Cook, and somebody that you had at wide receiver, whether it was Hardman or Robinson, whoever it might be. So there's just ways that you can flip your stacks around if you leave yourself that flexibility. A couple more things that hopped into the chat that I like. I don't like Shaheen as a punt. Someone mentioned, a couple people mentioned that. I'm not on it. I'm not particularly high on Pollard. Already talked about that. Someone mentioned something else I want to. Oh yeah. Kyler Murray does like Dan Arnold. So tying it into the tight end, that's another one. Again, back to Eric's point, that's one where you're definitely tying it into the stack though. I don't really just love Dan Arnold as plug him in and get what you get. Cause if he has a game, you'd like to see it attached to Murray with maybe Hopkins. So Murray, Hopkins, Arnold, then you could have something, maybe run it back with, Sanders or something. If you want to have where he scores early, gets the game rolling and gets that pace up. And then what else do we have here? Gage, we talked about Pollard versus Ayuk. That's a good question. Pollard versus Ayuk in the flex. I'm Ayuk for sure. I'll pay the money if you got it.
Yeah. If you really need the savings, but I think Ayuk is, you mentioned it, like he's like Allen Robinson level alpha, and the ownership is coming in there, but I still don't think people quite realize how big of an alpha that he is.
Yeah, it's just been incredible. And there's opportunity there as well. Like, so the guys like Debo out and whatnot, Kittle's been out for a while now. So this has all been part of the plan. And then lastly, someone mentioned about the wide receivers for the Rams, just going back to Goff. I'm Kupp greater than Woods. I'm normally Woods greater than Kupp. Just this week, I got the Kupp feelings. Anything on that before we get out of here, Eric?
No, I agree on Cup. The only last thing that I did want to say is that you get a lot of Dolphins questions and people being, oh, there's all this opportunity. I would be very, very weary of going in on an offense with Tua at the helm. They're on like their fourth string running backs. Their offensive line isn't very good. And now they have literally none of their weapons. I mean, Lynn Bowden wasn't even on this team to start the year. And most of the guys playing wide receiver weren't even on this team. And we're on third and fourth. So it's like a third string offense against still a strong Patriots defense. So not saying don't play Lynn Bowden and these guys, but I would be very weary of what's going on there.
Yeah, and that's the last thing. Somebody mentioned New England defense. I know I mentioned this isn't a backup quarterback situation. This is a backup squad situation. I definitely think the New England defense is in play. Thank you guys so much for the support. Thank you, Eric, for hopping on with me. You guys know where to find me on Twitter at Totag and Tambo. Hit us up if you have any questions. Other than that, thank you and good luck.
Fantasy Bar, 6 of my favorite plays for big week 15 on FanDuel and DraftKings, including a workhorse running back I think is way too cheap, a skinny stack for you to provide some value, my favorite quarterback play on the slate, and of course, my beast of the week. Who is it? Belly up to the Fantasy Bar and find out. Welcome in, guys. Week 15 edition Beers Daily Fantasy 6-pack back here in the friendly confines of the Fantasy Bar. Once again, providing 6 of my favorite plays across both FanDuel and DraftKings. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. Before we get started on this week's video, guys, as always, one simple request. Make sure you hit that thumbs up button. Guys have been doing a great job with that. I greatly appreciate it. That's the tip jar here in the Fantasy Bar. Also, make sure you subscribe to the channel and get notified when the videos are coming out. All right, let's dive in before we look at week 15. As always, we take a quick look back at week 14. A pretty solid week here in week 14. A few guys outproduced what we thought they would do. David Montgomery, Mike Gesicki, all very productive. Brandon Ayuk, even Taysom Hill, not bad. And even the guys that didn't do as well, Robinson Thomas, didn't kill our lineup. So all in all, a very good week 14. But as always, we turn the page to week 15. So let's get started. I promised you a workhorse running back at a discounted price. We're going to go to Los Angeles. We're going to roll with Cam Akers of the Rams. So Akers certainly going to have some ownership, no doubt. And there's a few reasons why I really like him. I'm not going to shy away. It's not going to be a 40-50% owned situation. There's a lot of good running back plays, especially in this price range, especially as rookies. But the reason I like Cam Akers so much, first of all, the split of the backfield. This has been a confusing backfield throughout the first 13 weeks of the season, but it was very clear in week 14 who the lead dog was in this backfield, and it's clearly the rookie they drafted to be this guy in Cam Akers. 29 carries in week 14. In fact, 29 of the 31 carries went to Cam Akers. So we're getting a workhorse under 7,000 on both sides. So that's another appealing factor, is they get a guy that's going to touch the ball that many times at these prices. Not only that, but the Rams, massive favorites in this game. They're at home. They're 17-point favorites. They have a 31 projected team total. This is exactly the kind of spot that we look to for our running backs. Home favorites here, and I expect them to get a big dose of work here against the Jets. Yes, the Jets, much worse against the pass. I have no issues building some rosters around guys like Jared Goff, Robert Woods if he goes, Cooper Kupp in that passing game against this Jets secondary. No doubt. If I don't have Cam Akers, that's probably the direction I'm going to go in a lot of lineups, but I want Cam Akers to be a big part of my build here. Yes, the Jets are worse against the pass, but still a bottom 10 team in the league in giving up fantasy points to the running back position. Cam Akers looked electric last week. I think that continues this week. Buy low while we can here on Cam Akers. All right, let's go to the tight end position. We're going to spend some money here on Baltimore tight end Mark Andrews. Now, Travis Kelce, obviously, the guy, if I could cram him into all my lineups and make it work, I would, but we live in the world of a salary cap, as my boy Dean 78904 would say. So to save some money here, nice fallback option with a guy like Mark Andrews. We know he's going to get the ball in this Baltimore offense, 22 targets over the last 3 weeks. Hollywood Brown on the COVID list as of this recording. Now, he may be back, but the point is they may be down some pass catchers, and even if they're not here against Jacksonville, Andrews gives you that beautiful combination of a floor. We know the targets are going to be there, and also gives us that 2 touchdown upside at a terrible tight end position. And that has just driven us nuts throughout the season. This Jacksonville defense, we know is bad. We know Baltimore's going to put up points. Lamar Jackson looked great last week, and I'm expecting Mark Andrews to be a big part of this offense. Whether or not Brown's in there or not does not matter to me. Save some money here and roster Mark Andrews this week against the Jacksonville Jaguars. All right, moving on. Let's go to the running back position. We're going to get a little controversial here. We're going to go to San Francisco, and we're going to roll with Jeff Wilson Jr. of the Niners. Now, this one can play out a lot of different ways. Obviously, Raheem Mostert, the domino here. And either way, I like Jeff Wilson here, and I'll lay it out why. If Mostert is out or limited, that's going to be great things for Jeff Wilson. I'm expecting him to lead that backfield in a big way. If Mostert is in, if he's available, well, that's going to lower ownership and interest in a guy like Jeff Wilson. So in either scenario, I am interested here. Now, if Mostert's in, Wilson would be more of a FanDuel play for me because of that touchdown upside. We'll talk about that here momentarily, but if he's out, I like Wilson on both sides. We talked about the touchdown upside. Wilson has really become that. Even when Mostert's in there, this is the guy getting the ball around the goal line. Hey, that's good news here against this Dallas defense, which has been terrible against the run. But Wilson also gives you some sneaky upside in the passing game. Has had a handful of targets in each of the last few weeks. So regardless of how this plays out, I have interest in Jeff Wilson. Why? Mainly because Dallas, an absolutely terrible team against the run. One of the league's worst rushing defenses. In fact, giving up over 175 rushing yards per game over the last 4 weeks have the Dallas Cowboys. So we know the Niners want to establish the running game here, and I think they do that in a big way, and I'm expecting Jeff Wilson to be a big part of that. We're going to go big here, not only count for 1 touchdown. I think Jeff Wilson gives you a multi-touchdown day here against the Dallas Cowboys, and all of that under 6,000 on FanDuel and just a tick over 5,000 on DraftKings, one of my favorite value plays on the week. All right, let's go to the other side of that game. I like this game. We're going to save you some more money at the wide receiver position with Michael Gallup of the Cowboys. Now, Dallas, one of those teams. They have 3 great pass catchers, and I know this offense has not been very good since Dak Prescott went down, but these are still 3 very viable pass catchers. And I think what happens a lot of weeks, people shy away because they don't know which guy to roster. Well, when I face these situations, it's never the same answer. When I get a guy like Michael Gallup, who's seeing the ball a lot lately with Andy Dalton. I mean, we're talking about almost 8 targets per game over the last 3 weeks at these kind of prices. I mean, 3,500 on DraftKings is an absolute steal for a guy of Michael Gallup's caliber. You got to imagine Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, see more of the big coverage there with the San Francisco 49ers. And Gallup should be the guy that's kind of forgotten about and makes for that great skinny stack. And what are we talking about? Just a guy on each side. You know, so we don't always have to go bonkers and stack up a game with 3, 4, 5 pieces. Sometimes it's as simple as I'm expecting Jeff Wilson to have a big day. I'm expecting San Francisco to do well in this game. And that's going to force Dallas to throw the ball probably more than they want to, which could lead to a big game for Michael Gallup. And we've certainly seen some big games out of him. Now, it's only a couple this season. I'm not going to say he's done it every single week, but this guy's given a 7, 8x return multiple times this year. And we're talking about that kind of return. Now we're talking about contending and potentially winning GPPs here. So you add it all up, he's too cheap. I'm expecting Dallas to throw more in this game. Michael Gallup is going to be a big part of my builds this week, especially on DraftKings at just 3,500. All right, moving on to our next pick. We're going to go to the quarterback position. We're going to roll with Tom Brady of the Buccaneers. Now, it would have been easy to come on here and say Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes. So that would have been way too easy. I want to get you a guy a little bit below that in ownership here. And I love this spot for Tom Brady. Let's start with the consistency. I know a lot of people ready to write old noodle arm off, but multiple touchdown passes for Tom Brady now in 10 of his 13 games this season. We know Atlanta's defense, yes, they've been much improved. Yes, they've been very good against the run, but still ranked dead last in fantasy points allowed to the quarterback position over the course of the season here. And surprisingly, Tom Brady been much better on the road. I know this is a very short sample here, but pretty drastic differences here. About 50 passing yards per game, averaging 8 more DraftKings points per game on the road. And in fact, 4 of his 6 biggest games have come away from Raymond James.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to Crunch Time NFL Edition, and we are joined by a couple of very sharp DFS minds. One, as per usual, Mr. Dan Gasper, aka Tuttle. What's up, Tuttle? How are you?
Doing all right. The Ezekiel Elliott surprise inactive kind of threw the whole morning into a tizzy, so that's not all that fun. But other
Peter
than that,
Overzet
doing
would
all
say
right.
the slate was flipped.
Yeah, it's flipped on its head.
It's flipped on its head. Yeah. I'm excited about that because there's probably some people who don't play him. I don't know. I'm excited to get your take at least on what you're supposed to do about that. So we will deep dive into some DFS content in a bit. We're also joined by not our usual co-host, Christy, because Christy is at the live final. Is it the DK live final, Tuttle?
I'm not sure which one. It might be FanDuel. I think it's FanDuel.
FanDuel's DK. I don't know. She's at a
I think
live
it's
final.
FanDuel.
So kudos to her. She is obviously good at what she does. We are joined by another person who is very good at what he does, and that is Justin Carlucci, the Looch. What's up, man? Welcome.
What's up? Thanks for having me. An FD Live Final is a great reason to miss a show. So good luck to Christy, who was also at the DK NBA Final a couple months ago. So she was on a roll. Good luck to her. And I'm excited for today. A lot of news. Yesterday, I watched my season-long team. We have one big league where we do all the smack talk. It's the league you want, that trophy where I was going up against Josh Allen. So every time Josh Allen scored, I poured another mixed drink and just kind of watched my season go down the drain. So what a beast Josh Allen is. But I'm ready. Sunday's a new day, and let's get to it, fellas.
Okay, that sounds excellent. Before we dive into some DFS, we do have some promos. We have our Prize Picks promo going on, which you get a 100% deposit bonus up to $100 if you use the promo code Grinders. So that right there is reason enough to sign up. But also, Tuttle gives you some can't miss locks. If they are wrong, he will personally pay you money. That
We
you
have the graphic, like Tuttle's lock of the week.
Yeah, right.
That is not
The
actually
lead pipe
anywhere near a lock.
He will not pay you back if he is wrong. I don't want that on record anywhere. But Tuttle, what are your picks today?
Yeah, when I do these, I actually honestly pick guys that I basically just want to talk about. Like, they're guys that I like, but I'll be 100% honest and say I haven't put a lot of time into, comparing the exact projection that they have on Prize Picks. But the two guys I really wanted. What's that?
I trust your gut.
The two guys I wanted to talk about, one guy I think is going to get glossed over, especially with all this Tony Pollard news. Actually, two guys, really. Kenyon Drake and J.K. Dobbins. Kenyon Drake, I'd like the over on his prop. I think he's like a really sneaky good tournament option. And then again, I think he's going to get completely overlooked with all this crazy Pollard news now, just because he's in the same price range as Pollard on DraftKings. He is a little bit more expensive on FanDuel, but Drake or the Cardinals elevated DJ Foster yesterday from their practice squad, which is a pretty good indication that Chase Edmonds is probably going to be inactive today. We won't know that for sure until about 90 minutes before lock time and for that game. But if Edmonds is inactive, Drake's going to take an even bigger role than he's already been seeing, and he's already seeing a really good role in that offense. He actually ties the league with Derrick Henry, league lead in opportunities in the red zone. He's scoring a ton of touchdowns and basically gets a touchdown a game. So I like the Drake over. That's a long way of saying I like the Drake over on Prize.
But I mean, also that has some pretty serious implications for DFS, I imagine, as well.
Yeah, like I said, I don't think he's going to go owned at all now. I think he'll probably be single-digit ownership with all this news. And I like him, especially on DraftKings. And then J.K. Dobbins, he's actually the opposite. He makes for a little bit better of a play on FanDuel, although I think he's an okay play on DraftKings as well. But FanDuel, he's priced at $5,900. He has been trending in the right direction. Mark Ingram only saw one snap last week. It was the first snap of the game, little flea flicker play that did not work out at all. But Mark Ingram is pretty much phased out of that offense. And so it's now J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards running the show. And Edwards is a little annoying still, but I think Dobbins, I like the over on the 13 projected points for Dobbins in this spot against a terrible Jaguars defense.
Okay, good stuff. With that out of the way, with the intros out of the way, with the weather out of the way, because it's nice everywhere, there is no weather, we're going to dive right into some DFS content. Guys, my lineups are so freaking correlated. You have never seen. It's like correlated on 3 or 4 different levels. I am definitely winning the Millie, but I might listen to y'all and make some changes as we go through. So we will start with Justin and the quarterback position. What are you looking at, Looch?
Well, I think there's a lot of interesting options today. Obviously, it goes without saying, Lamar Jackson's in play against the Jags. You can even play him naked. There was a period of time this season where he really wasn't running the ball, but, obviously after last week and the heroics, whether he was in the bathroom or not, whatever, it was just an amazing game, but he really took it upon himself to make every play. I mean, I don't know off the top of my head how many times he completed past that game. I think it was probably under 10 or 11 or 12 or something, because I played Showdown that night. And every time I play Showdown with Baltimore, I get suckered into a Willie Snead captain line, and that it wasn't the night. So I do think Dobbins is interesting, and I do think you can get some leverage there because Lamar is going to be probably very popular. And Mahomes, I mean, obviously, I think those two guys might have the highest ceiling on the slate today. Mahomes is in a great environment in a dome. They just don't run the ball. And I was talking about it all week to a couple of friends of mine. It's like you draft Clyde Edwards. He's really underperformed. You bring Le'Veon Bell in. Maybe you try to fix some things. He still doesn't really get the ball. So they're not going to run the ball. And New Orleans is pretty darn good against the run, too. So I think, maybe 40, 45 pass attempts from Mahomes. Maybe things get crazy. And if they get crazy, maybe you even see a couple more. Maybe that's a hot take. I don't know. But I think Kyler Murray's really interesting today. Just check some injury reports last night. I saw Darius Slay and Avonte Maddox are both out for Philly. Not that Avonte Maddox is very good as it is, and Slay has got bullied once or twice this year. And at that price, $7K, I mean, there was a couple earlier this year, there was a couple of weeks, most weeks where Murray was the QB1 or QB2. So I bumped Kyler Murray up a little bit after seeing that news. And this is another guy who for a couple of weeks really wasn't running the ball. He had 3 games with 5 rushing attempts in a row is what I'm saying. Can't talk today. But he ran the ball 13 times last week. So rushing upside is huge in what Kyler Murray does. And if he can get the ball to DeAndre Hopkins against a bunch of B team guys out there for Philly, I think Murray has some serious upside. And one last guy I want to say, everybody's running away from Deshaun Watson after one bad game. He's under 7K. The Colts they're a little vulnerable. They're not this, tenacious defense everybody thought they were the first half of the year. So with Brandon Cooks back, I think you can have a little bit of a cheaper stack there, with Cooks at 6K and Deshaun a little bit cheaper than the other guys I just mentioned.
Okay, welcome to the show. Those are some good takes, man. I liked that. That was excellent. Tuttle, you got anything else here? I mean, those are obviously at the top end, a couple easy ones, but anything else you're looking at?
I want to reiterate, I like the Watson take quite a bit as well. I think he's going to be completely overlooked. I mean, in terms of the chalky guys, I completely 100% agree with the guys that can run like Lamar and Kyler. I am doing what I can to get Lamar in over Kyler, but I still think Kyler is a really strong tournament option. Somebody else I think people will be asking about, Jalen Hurts, I think is probably one of the better point per dollar quarterbacks on the slate in terms of price. I don't have that many lineups with him, with that said, but I can see the reason for playing him if you're kind of trying to jam in a little bit higher price guys throughout your lineup. I will say you don't have to stack Hurts. We always talk about correlation. In fact, one of my favorite stacks or correlation plays with Hurts is probably just playing DeAndre Hopkins on the other side, as opposed to actually one of his receivers. So I think Hurts is fine, but you do not have to go out of your way to stack him. If you do want to force a stack, Jalen Reagor would be the guy for me. Deep play threat, only needs really one play to pay off his price tag. In terms of any other guys, I mean, Justin mentioned really all the higher upside guys. I think Ryan Tannehill is another decent option, could provide some leverage off of Derrick Henry, who's going to be, I think Henry's still going to see some decent ownership even with all this news. So if you want to go with the Tannehill and the Tennessee passing attack as a stack or double stack, I think that's a fine approach for tournaments too.
Okay. You didn't say my guy Drew Brees, so I'm assuming my Millie shots, my Millie Hooper shot.
Man, what do we have we got him around 6. Here's the thing. He was the guy that we weren't even playing that much before the injury, and now he's coming off injury. Reports are that he's looking good. Obviously, I don't think they're going to say anything else that he's not looking good. I will say I think he's going to get some ownership just because he is very easy to pair. Like Jared Cook's going to be high on Emmanuel Sanders, Draquan Smith. They're all going to be high on Alvin Kamara, obviously. So I think Breeze is going to get some ownership just because he's very easy to pair in the game that most people are going to stack. But I actually don't like him all that much. I wouldn't be that surprised to see them struggle and basically it just be a dump off to Alvin Kamara game, which is great for Alvin Kamara, but not great for the rest of the offense.
So I thought it was sneaky and you would love it, and it turns out it's not sneaky and you don't like it.
I mean, I just don't know the upside there, right? Like,
no, I was just looking. I don't think he has more than like 25, 30 fantasy points in any games this year.
Right. If you're looking at DraftKings, it looks like 24. If you're looking at our game log here that I have pulled up, 24 is his highest. Like, how many times has he gone over 300 yards? Twice this season.
I should have thought that out.
He will have to go over 300 yards to have any sort of upside at all. Again, it's in the game that everyone wants to stack, so he's got that going for him. But I don't love it.
All right, let's move on to some other plays. Tuttle, we're running a tiny bit behind here. Let's get into running back. Tuttle, give me the plays. Obviously, you mentioned was it Drake right off the bat here?
Yeah, Drake is the guy that I don't think is going to see really any ownership now. We have him projected at 14%. I'll take the under it looks like 10%. I didn't refresh before I came on the show. So 10% DraftKings, I would still guess under that, and 88% FanDuel. Again, he's the guy that would benefit the most with the news that Edmonds isn't active, and I think that's the direction we're trending. I would not play him in cash games, but I do think he's a good tournament option.
Let's talk about those cash plays, and let's start with Pollard if we can.
Yeah, Pollard. So Pollard's the interesting one, just because, and I should probably give this a refresh because I need new ownership. And Pollard, I'm very curious to see what he is, because I think he's a case where I think everybody's going to go to jam him in right away. And I think that's absolutely the move on FanDuel, where he's only 4,700. Like, play Pollard, play whoever else that you want then, and you're good to go. So we have Pollard on FanDuel projected for 28% ownership on FanDuel, and right around the same on DraftKings. But Pollard, I think, is absolutely, you just jam him in on FanDuel. He's underpriced for what his role is going to be on FanDuel. DraftKings, I think, is interesting. I still think you can get away with playing him in cash games. I still think he's an okay option, but I don't think he's nearly as strong. They actually priced him up a little bit. He's still fairly cheap at 5,200, but there are those guys around him still. Mentioned Kenyon Drake, J.K. Dobbins, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is kind of a tournament option. There are plenty of tournament pivots off of Pollard that if Pollard's going to come in around 30% in tournaments, I just want to take those other guys that are going to be lower owned, just because I don't think he's a good play, but he's not just an absolute smash play at that price on DraftKings.
Okay, let's stop it there. Justin, do you feel the same way, or do you think I was assuming this is a smash spot, feature back in, for 5,200 or whatever? I thought that his ownership would be like 80%. And I was just going to laugh at the 20% donkeys that didn't play him, but maybe I'm the donkey in the 20 or 30%.
Well, maybe I'm the donkey too. I don't know. My first reaction was to not stuff him in. He's not exactly min price anymore. I know there's a lot of options there too. And, San Fran's defense since before the season started was decimated with adversity and injuries and everything. But I don't know. I'm not sold on him smashing. And, 5,200, he makes a lot of lineups work. There's a lot of very high price stackable games. So I totally get it. And we've seen GPP winning lineups where the chalk fails and you can still make a winning lineup. I'm envisioning like a Mike Davis week from a couple weeks ago where he had like 8 points and someone still took down the power sweep with him. So I don't hate it. I don't think it's horrible chalk. I'm just not really running there. I don't know. There's a lot of options in that range. I like the Dobbins call. I know we talked about that with Mark Ingram just getting phased out finally, like it's long overdue. So I think there's other places to go that I'm interested in. One guy that I never feel comfortable about playing, and Twitter loves to hammer this guy, and I get it, but there's probably some sticker shock with David Montgomery. 7K now. He's had a lot of big runs that have kind of bailed him out, but Minnesota has been pretty vulnerable against the run. I think they're top 5 worst in yielding successful rush plays too. So I think he's an interesting guy I just wanted to bring up, outside of some of the obvious guys that Tuttle mentioned.
Okay. I don't think Tuttle really did bring up a ton of like obvious guys, because we kind of jumped right to a couple. So who are your favorite plays? Do we have, I don't know, Derrick Henry, or just go through some of the obvious ones?
It's really hard to not play Kamara, especially on DraftKings. I've been trying to not do that, but I can't do it. I'm going to play Kamara. I'm going to lock him in. I'm probably going to play 3 optimal lines. I'll probably use them in at least 2 of them. I just, the Breeze effect on him, or should I say the Taysom Hill effect, one way or another, was just, we saw it. We had a couple of weeks of a sample size to see it. And last week, when they were playing significantly from behind, Taysom Hill finally had to throw the ball and use his arm to try to win a game. We saw a little bit of increase in volume here, but got to get the ball to the best players, and Drew Brees is going to do that. And I think Kamara has probably the safest floor on the slate. I know I'm probably saying what everybody on every tout site is saying right now, but I'm locking Kamara, and I can't get off him today, guys. What are your thoughts on that, Tuttle?
I think if you're getting off him, it's on FanDuel. And I was kind of just running through the scenario in my head, like FanDuel, for him to be optimal, probably going to have to score. I mean, he's going to have to score at least one touchdown, if not two. So in tournaments, I'm fine. Like the point, it's only half PPR on FanDuel. I think he's going to get a lot of the dump offs, but like we're talking about some decent guys in his price range. The guy I was looking off as a pivot, correct, right off him is Jonathan Taylor, right in that same price range. Taylor's not going to be low owned by any stretch of the imagination, but like if Taylor actually does take lead back duties or like a 60-40 split, 70-30 split in this matchup against Houston, I actually argue his upside might be higher than Kamara. And I think he's actually got a safer floor in that sense too. But on DraftKings, I'm right there with Justin. I think he's a guy. It's so hard not to just lock him in just because he's going to probably get 10 receptions. Like he's going to get 10 targets for sure.
Okay. So. Let's keep this rolling here because we are still a little bit behind here where I like to be on the show. So Justin, why don't you run through wide receiver for us? You can start with some, what is the chalk plays would help, or what do you think are the right cash plays, not necessarily the chalk?
Okay, so the right cash plays, first guy that comes to mind and looking at ownership is Brandon Ayuk. The volume he's seeing, especially without Debo the last couple of weeks. And this is a guy who gets involved in many ways. They even run some of that stupid end around stuff in the red zone, the new trend. So I think there's just multiple ways this guy can try to find the end zone against the Cowboys defense that, we've seen it all year now. We have a lot of sample size here. It's not good. So Ayuk just, in terms of points per dollar here, I think he's probably one of the best plays for cash on the slate, especially when you factor in he's going to carry some ownership as well. Another guy that seems popular is Emmanuel Sanders. Obviously very cheap. Strange when when Breeze was around and he first started popping up, it just wasn't getting the ball a lot. It almost seemed like Breeze was favoring Traquan for a couple of weeks when Michael Thomas was out. Is that going to change? I don't know. I mean, 4,200, sure. It feels like he has a safer floor than Traquan, you would think. Traquan's more of a big play guy, higher ADOT guy, I think. But I think Sanders is up there as well. A guy, just switching gears. I know we got to pass the Tuttle for GPPs. I do like AJ Brown, and I think he's really good leverage off of Derrick Henry. The Lions defense is not good. I love our Gridiron IQ tool here at Rotogrinders, one of our awesome features here. And Detroit is bottom of the barrel in many aspects. Yes, against the run, but also against the pass. And I think they're bottom 5 worst in explosive pass plays as well. And we know this play action shot game, AJ Brown's a yak monster. He's one of those guys where it doesn't make sense a lot, and he just ends up finding the end zone. The volume's not always there, but I do like AJ Brown for GPPs coming in. We got him projected under 10% today.
He's so fun to watch. You mentioned Gridiron IQ really quick. That is a premium tool. By the way, did you guys know if you sign up for Rotogrinders Premium right now, you get $10 off. And that's whether you want to do the combo package, $10 off your first month. Whether you want to do the combo package, which is all sports, or just one individual sport, which is cheaper, you still get $10 off for your first month, which is a pretty darn good deal. We got basketball starting up too. So now would be a good time to do that. Devin's going to drop the little promo code right there. Tuttle, wide receivers.
Yeah, I'm going to talk real quick about lineup construction on DraftKings because I think there were some cash game builds that had people playing both Emmanuel Sanders and Traquan Smith, and then on top of Alvin Kamara, who's just an absolute lock. I don't feel comfortable doing that. I know there are smarter people than me that feel comfortable doing that. I don't feel comfortable. I kind of have the same stance as Justin here that I would probably only play one of those guys. Like, I don't know if there's going to be enough volume. Yes, they're going to quote unquote project well, but that's a little too much fragility for my cash game lineups where I wouldn't like to have all 3 of those guys in there.
Do you have a preference out of the 2 receivers?
Manny slight preference, but I could see it going either way. Like it's definitely tough to project. And I'm fine. I think you probably want to play one of them in cash games, but I also wouldn't scoff if I opened up a head-to-head opponent and saw that they faded both of them, which I think is probably a bit of a hot take. I think people are probably saying jam in Manny Sanders in cash. But I don't think it's not like these guys were performing all that well before earlier in the season in the exact same scenario. Like basically it was Alvin Kamara getting a 30% target share and these other guys randomly would get a touchdown or 2 in the game. And that's basically what would,
was that before Michael Thomas being out?
Yeah, that was with Michael Thomas being out.
Okay.
So it was like first 8 weeks of the season or so, other than maybe 2 games, we saw this pretty much exact same
Gotcha.
scenario. So
Okay,
we have a
other
pretty decent
receivers, though.
sample on it. Yeah, other receivers. I mean, it's not fun, but Marquise Brown is somebody I like to lose money on each week. I'll probably lose money on him again this week. I mean, he's not getting volume, so I don't know why I talk myself into it. But again, big play threat. Somebody I like is a leverage play off of DeAndre Hopkins, who I think is getting a little bit of steam. Hopkins was one of my favorite players earlier in the week. I still like him a bit, but I think Christian Kirk provides pretty decent leverage off of Hopkins. In the same sense that Hopkins is going to benefit from injuries, like we're going to benefit, like Kirk's going to benefit from those injuries as well. And you could actually see a scenario, like I'm not an X's and O's guys by any means. There are people a lot smarter than me, but I know like sometimes people have false confidence. Sometimes coaches have false confidence in their players. Like Doug Peterson has false confidence in Darius Slay that he's going to be able to lock down the opposing number one. And without Darius Slay available, we could just see a lot of bracket coverage on DeAndre Hopkins, things like that, just opens up the other guys a little bit more. So Kirk, I like quite a bit as a leverage option for tournaments.
Okay. Anything else there in tournaments, or move on to tight end?
We can move on. I mean, it's basically just stack. Are all my other takes.
Whatever's in your stack, go for it.
Right.
Okay, then let's go to tight end. Then we got to talk defense. Then I want to talk stacks. Then I want to take questions. We've got 8 minutes to do all that.
Okay, so tight ends, I like Cook over Jared Cook. I would rather have exposure to Jared Cook than Emmanuel Sanders and Tre'Quan Smith, which again is probably a little bit of a hot take, but it is what it is. I think he is the better overall play. Travis Kelce is obviously a smash. It's tough to get him in some lineups. I don't think you absolutely have to force him in, but he's going to be the best play on the slate. Mark Andrews, again, good play. And then another guy I'll just throw out real quick, Irv Smith Jr. He was not on the injury report on Friday, which I think is the first time in a long, long time. Last week, he played very limited snaps, but it seems like that should be going up with not being on the injury report. And then Jonnu Smith, I also will throw on there too real quick.
Okay, Justin, anything different at tight end or anything you just flagrantly disagree with?
No, I agree with all that. I like Jonnu Smith for GPPs. There's going to be points in that Tennessee game somewhere, and Jonnu or AJ or even Corey Davis is pretty significant leverage over Henry for sure. And Henry might just bomb us again with a 40. Who knows? He could. But I'm going to eat some Cole Kmet chalk too, significantly out-snapping Jimmy Graham in the last 4 weeks. It seems like every week he's getting more involved. He's super athletic, 3K flat. He makes a lot of those bigger stacks, minus Travis Kelce. I know it's not very popular, but Travis Kelce is basically a wide receiver 1 at this point. You can even get a little bit unique, which is something I never, ever really do, but you can even go, Cole Kmet tight end and make something with Kelce fit in the flex, but we're going to talk about stacks in a little bit, I'm sure.
Excellent. Okay, let's talk defense real quick. I always struggle with this every week, but I'm pretty sure I've got it figured out this week. Justin, what is the cash defense? What is the right defense to play?
If you haven't figured out, I'd love to know because I definitely don't. I'm thinking, Seattle's probably going to get some love. Haskins very turnover prone, and that's what everybody shoots for. It seems like you got him in the Millie build.
I got to figure it out.
Millie build. All right.
I just figure I always you play the defense against the crappiest quarterback that and to me, Haskins is the crappiest quarterback that I can think of.
That's fair. That's seriously fair. That's seriously fair. I don't care if he bombs a couple to Scary Terry and throws 3 picks. I'm fine with it. So whatever works. But yeah, and I don't know. I'm interested to see what Arizona does. I'm interested to see round 2 of Jalen Hurts. He had 100+ rushing yards. I want to see what they saw in film, if they attack it differently here than the Saints did. And I don't hate the Cardinals. And now that Stafford's playing, I'm not playing Tennessee defense. I was thinking about with some Henry Titans correlations, but I'm kind of not there. Though Stafford might not finish the game. Who knows how hurt he really is? So I guess is your glass half full or half empty there. So those are some of the defenses I'm looking in. And as crazy as maybe it is, I'm kind of looking at the Washington football team defense a little bit here too. Not crazy about it, but Chase Young just wreaks havoc, and we know Russ Wilson runs for his life. So we've seen a little bit of an imperfect Russ here throughout the season. More mistakes than we're accustomed to seeing. So they're kind of a cheaper. I think they're 2,600 that I might throw in a GPP here too.
Yeah, Chase Young, so good at football, and it's super fun to watch. Tuttle, anything different at defense?
No. I have no defensive takes. I won't waste your time.
Yeah, just pick it and hope for a touchdown. All right, let's get to your favorite stacks. Tuttle, quick, what are your favorite stacks that you're looking, or I should say correlations, maybe more so than stacks?
Yeah, I do like Baltimore if you can make it work. Philadelphia is probably my favorite later game stack.
Like passing attack.
Yeah, DeAndre Hopkins, Kyler, and then KC in New Orleans. I think is going to be the absolute chalk. But I think it's fine as well. Actually two, I think are going to get fairly overlooked. Indianapolis, Houston, I think is going to get a little bit overlooked, and I think that could be a shootout. And then Tampa Bay, Atlanta, I think is getting a little bit overlooked as well.
Okay, Justin.
Yeah, good points. I really like Watson for larger field GPPs. When are we ever going to get him at 6% again? I think Brandon Cooks is coming in at 10% or less. We saw Indy become very vulnerable the last couple of weeks, and I like the bounce back spot here for Watson and with Cooks healthy. But yeah, I mean, the obvious stacks, you made a lot of good points. It's very hard with Mahomes, and I talked about this with TJ on our preview pod. If you think Mahomes is going to go off at his high price, sometimes you almost just have to consider double stacking him. The whole thing with Tyreek and Kelsey not going off together is long gone because there's just no run game either. So it's almost, if you're paying a premium for Mahomes, maybe you just double stack it up. But obviously, then you have to find some serious value, and you're plugging in your Tony Pollards and your Cole Kmet stuff.
Yeah,
that's all I have.
It feels like maybe we have that value though, so maybe that's an option here this week. All right, let's get to some questions here. We've got 3-4 minutes left. Don't forget Rotogrinders, by the way. You get $10 off if you sign up for premium right now for your first month. I highly recommend you do that because you get content like this all the time. Plus, we have the best tools in the biz, and that's not just braggadocio. That it's really the truth. We have the best tools in the biz. Bazinga says, "Hey, would Kansas City defense be the best contrarian D with everyone playing the Saints?" Luch?
I like it. I think that's a good way to get unique. I'm not running to it. Like I think defense is so volatile. We saw kickers get phased out. Maybe one day we'll see defense get phased out too. But I can't argue with that. It's not my favorite. Would not use it in cash, but for GPP, sure.
Okay. Moonlighter says DKGPP, Tuttle, Gallup, or Bowden?
GPP, let's go Bowden.
All right. Fit Crook says DK Cash, you want Pollard and Sanders or Bowden and Ayuk?
I think I'm going Pollard, Sanders, and Cash for ownership purposes.
All right. We'll go to Tyler Madison. He says Kmet or Adkins?
I'll take Cole.
Same.
All right. Let's see here. Sean says QQ, Bourne or Bowden?
I like Bowden over Bourne personally.
I'm seeing in the chat, Derrick Henry needs 2 touchdowns and over 100 yards to pay off. Every time I see that, he goes for 200 yards and 3 touchdowns. Every time I see that narrative, it always happens. Let's see here. There's a lot of talking amongst it, which is great, but not a lot of questions. Here we go. Kenton says, you want Pollard or Gallman?
Pollard. That must be Yahoo. Pollard.
Yeah, or season long or something. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. If I had to pick one.
Yeah. All right. David Lynch says DK Cash. That's not a question either. I'm proud of the YouTube chat for all of their chatting amongst themselves, but okay, here we go. Dylan says Hardman or Robinson out of the Kansas City wide receivers. Which one?
I hope you're playing a very large field GPP with that, but I'm always a sucker for the big play Hardman potential, especially if you're running in a stack. I mean, you're kind of going to need that long, explosive pass play for Hardman to pay off, I think.
Okay, lightning round with a minute left. D. Kinder says Rams, Ayuk, and Cooks. Rams, Ayuk, and Cook, or Seahawks, Traquan Smith, and Kelsey, DK Cash.
Ayuk. Are we talking Jared Cook or Brandon Cook? Jared Cook or Brandon Cooks? Rams, Ayuk.
Cook. A single Cook. Just a Cook.
A single Cook. Not too many Cooks. Okay, Rams. I think I like Rams, Ayuk, and Cook. I think if I'm getting that right. I think.
Okay. Tuttle, Rocky Raccoon. How about Ahmed Mitchell in a GPP, not in a much different situation than Pollard?
I mean, I'm not as confident as about Ahmed's workload. Basically, I think it's going to be split with Breida, just coming off injury. So I would not do that. I don't think.
Great, Stan, DK Cash, Hurts and Sanders, or Lamar and Traquan?
I mean, I'm personally, I like playing Lamar and Cash, I think, today.
Okay. T. Jackson says Bowden or sorry. Did I cut you off early? Oh, okay. That is the lock, my friends, and that means we have done the business. We have done the things that we need to do, and we have hopefully won the people. Tuttle, are you like taking a photo of this moment, or
Yeah, no,
what are you doing there, bud?
I'm getting ready to sweat is what I'm doing.
All
I
right,
don't know about
I'm
you.
pumped. I'm pumped with my lineup with 4 correlations. You didn't even know you could make a lineup with 4 correlations, but that's what I have going on. I literally don't think I can lose with that. Generally, at this point, we ask someone if we should hang out here a little longer or if we should go watch some football. And Justin, as you were new, what do you think? Would you rather hang out here for another 15 minutes or go watch some football?
I think we need to watch some football because so I can get on the good side of my co-host here. One thing, I'm surprised we didn't have any Cam Akers questions. He's kind of in that 6K range, and I was like, I don't have him. I usually play the power sweep every week, and I don't have him. He was a guy I really considered just with my construction. I loved what I saw on the Thursday Night Football. I had the show with Tambo, and I'm like, listen, Sean McVay needs to put the best player on the field. Like, this has to be the week. So we'll see if he goes back to, mixing it up, or are we going to get some Cam Akers? But no, what's your take on that, guys? Tuttle and Kevin, what do you think about Akers?
What are you doing to us? No, we're supposed to go watch.
I know, but it's eating me up inside, man. I have to know.
I think he went from like absolute chalk to being a second thought on the slate. So it'll be interesting to see his ownership. I like trends should say he's going to be the guy, but Sean McVay has pulled stuff in the past where the only concern I have here is Darrell Henderson was supposedly had some sort of shoulder injury on a short week. Mm-hmm. And so the only concern that I could see happening is like you go all in on Cam Akers, and then after the, first series, Darrell Henderson comes in and they're like, yeah, Darrell Henderson's shoulder's feeling better, and now it's going to be a split again. That's the only thing I could see. I don't think that's the highest probability. I think the highest likelihood is that Akers is the guy now, but I don't know. McVay worries me a little bit.
I feel like we're getting trolled with the football talk when we should be going and watching football.
I had to get that in.
Yeah. Guys, hey, everyone, by the way, if you did not hear it the first 2 times I said it, Rotogrinders, we've got the best content in the biz, and right now you get a discount, $10 off your first month if you sign up for premium. Most of these crunch time shows, especially as we get into NBA, these are not free. They will not be free to YouTube. They are for paying customers, for premium members. So go ahead, sign up for Rotogrinders. You get to hang out with some really sharp people like Justin and Tuttle. I was going to say like us, but I'm not including myself in that sharp take. So for Justin, for Tuttle, guys, we appreciate you. We love you. We will catch you next week. You have been crunched.